Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1 Time Travel Diary. The first day after crossing over. Shocked. Fortunately, I live alone, hiding at home, and didn't dare to go out. The second day after crossing over. I went out tremblingly, trying to get familiar with the environment, being cautious and not daring to talk to anyone. The third day after crossing over. I was a little less panicked, and I ate something. The food in this world is terrible, only the fruit wine is good, with low sweetness and very palatable. The fourth day after crossing over. I found some books and newspapers, and started reading like crazy, wanting to understand this world. Yes, I understand the language of this world. A small benefit for travelers. The fifth day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Understanding the world. The sixth day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Understanding the world. A little socializing. Note, I told the neighbors nearby that the weather was good. The seventh day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Understanding the world. Attended a banquet. The girls in this world are so hot that they actually took the initiative to touch my thigh. I am definitely not an ordinary person, at least I am a high-quality dating partner. The eighth day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Understanding the world. A little surprised. There really are gods in this world. Maybe there are demons and the like. The ninth day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Understanding the world. I recalled my identity. An imperial civil servant, the son of a businessman, without any connections or background. I am currently on vacation and the vacation is about to end. The 10th day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Gaining a deeper understanding of the body structure of female creatures in this world. I discovered a little secret, I seem to have some superpowers. In my memory, this strange energy that is so weak that it is almost unnoticeable is called bloody glory. The 11th day after crossing over. Reading books and newspapers. Understanding the world. Getting ready to end my vacation and face familiar colleagues. Even in a different world, I cannot escape the mundane world and still have to work. Life must go on. The 12th day after crossing over. Packing my luggage. Damn, what did I find? Someone's diary? He actually died from summoning an evil god. Wait. Chapter 2 Returning from vacation. If someone greets you, give them a warm hug. If they are women, compliment them on their good looks. If something unexpected happens, just laugh and say, "What a nice day today." Charlotte Mecklen kept encouraging herself and tried to be calm and composed. About 10 days ago, Charlotte Mecklen was still called Wang Haixin, a high school math teacher who was born on Earth and completed a standard undergraduate education. He didn't know how he died. During the last days of his life, he was confused and had no memory at all. When he woke up, Wang Haixin became Charlotte Mecklen, an imperial government employee on vacation. Charlotte Mecklen worked in the general office of the central government. She was a first-level clerk, ranked 41st in the imperial bureaucracy, and was responsible for some clerical work. The country he worked hard for and received a salary for was called the Fars Empire. A powerful country that Wang Haixin had never seen in his memory. Charlotte Mecklen is a native of the Old World. She was born in the Principality of Behemoth, note, one of the vassal states of the Fars Empire. When she grew up, she went to the empire to study. After graduation, she successfully got a good job in the capital Strasbourg. In the first few days after crossing over, he was very panicked. No one could remain calm when encountering such a thing. Fortunately, Charlotte Mecklen was on vacation at that time. He rented a small house by the sea in Sennis alone. The neighbors around him were all strangers, which gave him enough time and environment to calm down. Wang Haixin quickly judged that replacing Charlotte Mecklen's identity and living a routine life was his best choice. After crossing over, he got most of the memories of Charlotte Mecklen and gained some ancient knowledge, which can perfectly integrate into this fantasy world with a classical European style. Yes, this is a fantasy world. There are gods, magical creatures, forbidden ancient creations, giants, barbarians, blood races, magic, fighting spirit, alchemy, extraordinary people and extraordinary items. This world is ruled by 9 righteous gods. In the indescribable ancient times, the 9 gods concluded a sacred covenant, the Law of the Gods, which stipulates that the 9 gods take turns to rule the world in units of hundreds of years, called eras. Now is the 35th year of Lady Black Moon's rule over the world, and it is also the 5th era of the establishment of the Fars Empire. Charlotte Mecklen stepped into the government office with a calm smile, and greeted everyone she saw in a gentle manner. He was quite blurry about every person who passed by him. The original owner's memory pixels invested in the appearance of most colleagues were too low, and it was not enough for him to recognize any one person. Just like although we can recognize most acquaintances at any time, when we are alone, we can't imagine the appearance of most acquaintances. This is a small defect of human memory. He came to the office in his memory. He shared an office with Charlotte Mecklen and more than 20 clerks. Although it was not an independent office space, it was much better than those colleagues working in the hall. He just pushed open the door and heard a serious middle-aged woman calling out, "Mr. Mecklen, you will have a special job in the next few days." Charlotte smiled slightly and searched her memory to piece together the image of the speaker. The middle-aged lady was his direct supervisor, Mrs. Aldegand, a senior government worker with a stern and majestic appearance. "Okay, Mrs. Aldegand. I will do my best to complete this work arrangement." Mrs. Aldegand was slightly surprised. She thought Charlotte Mecklen would refuse. This job was very difficult and almost no one was willing to take it. However, since Charlotte had already agreed, she would not make things complicated. She said calmly, "Take this ID to Kilmainham prison, and someone will arrange your next job. Here's 1 ACU, as a subsidy for your temporary job this time." Charlotte smiled slightly, took the envelope handed over by Lady Aldegand, and searched her memory. She soon recalled the relevant memories of the imperial currency. The empire has 3 monetary units, ACU, foule and centime. 1 ACU is equal to 10 foules, and 1 foule is equal to 100 centimos. ACU means shield in the imperial language. There are 2 denominations of 1 ACU and 5 ACU. It is made of gold and is very valuable. Nowadays, only the rich and nobles have a large amount of ACU in their homes. It has become a collection. It is rarely circulated in the market and almost no one will spend it. Foule was originally used as a unit of weight for currency, equivalent to 1 pound of silver. The third emperor changed it to minting silver coins. The people of the empire called it the old foule. The fourth emperor issued paper money of the same amount, which was called the new foule. There are 5 denominations, 1, 5, 10, 20, and 50. After the change to paper money, the silver franc, like the ACU, rarely appeared in the market and actually withdrew from circulation. 1 franc is roughly equivalent to the purchasing power of 1,800 to 1,900 RMB. There are 5 denominations of centimes. 1 centime, 5 centimes, 10 centimes, 20 centimes and 50 centimes. No paper money has been issued, and it is the only coin that is still in large circulation. 1 ACU is already a very generous extra job reward, which is equivalent to Charlotte's salary for 1.5 months. That's right, as a first-class clerk in the empire, Charlotte is a high-paid person with a weekly salary of 1 franc and 70 centimes, and even has the ability to take a vacation every year. Except that he has not saved much because of his short working years, and has not been able to buy a house, so he can only rent a house. He is a handsome man among the young people in the empire. This is also the fundamental reason why there are girls touching his thighs at social banquets. Charlotte Mecklen is a very high-quality imperial man with a bright future. Mrs. Aldegand is serious and speaks little. After explaining the work, she returned to her office. Charlotte turned and walked out of the office, leaving the government office building. She waved casually on the street, and a public carriage stopped quietly. The coachman waited for Charlotte to get on the carriage and let the horse trot again. Charlotte sat in the carriage, experiencing the bumps of this ancient means of transportation, while opening the envelope and pulling out a 10 ACU banknote and a formal official letter of introduction. The empire did not issue any denomination of ACU banknotes. There was no 1 ACU banknote, nor a 5 ACU banknote. ACU only had gold coins. The above reasons combined made the empire have a custom that was puzzling to the time travelers, habitually calling a 10 ACU banknote 1 ACU. Charlotte put the 10 ACU banknote into her wallet, put the letter of introduction into the pocket of her coat, crumpled the envelope containing it into a ball, and threw it out of the carriage lightly, landing in a trash can on a street corner, with amazing accuracy. The 6th emperor of the empire, Julius was born with a cleanliness obsession. He could not stand the sewage and garbage everywhere in the city, so he promoted the municipal administration of garbage cans. It turns out that there are things that the emperor cannot do. This municipal administration was not completely successful, and it was only preserved in the Val d'Oise district. The Val d'Oise district is where the royal palace, the central government office, the 9 Orthodox churches and the 4 most famous universities are located. These noble gentlemen are also willing to enjoy a clean living environment. As for other districts, let them go. Chapter 3 The First Rose of the Empire. Kilmainham Prison is located in the Marne district, separated from the Val d'Oise district by 2 districts. The carriage was not very fast, and Charlotte dozed off in the carriage for a while before she heard the coachman cautiously remind her, "Sir, we have arrived at Kilmainham Prison." Charlotte got off the carriage, said goodbye to the coachman with a smile on her face, and hurried to Kilmainham Prison. He handed the prison guard a letter of introduction and said with a smile, "This is an identity certificate issued by the central government office. I am Charlotte Mecklin, a formal employee, and I am here to assist in a job." The prison guard carefully checked the letter, returned it to Charlotte, and said respectfully, "Mr. Mecklin, please go straight to the first office building and ask the reception secretary, Mrs. Pascal. She will take you to see Miss Mendelman." Charlotte's smile was a little stiff, and she asked, "I am going to assist Miss Mendelman?" "That lady." The prison guard showed a proud smile and replied, "Yes, it is the first rose of the empire, Miss Mendelman." Charlotte did not dare to ask any more questions, and hurried into Kilmainham Prison, and easily found the first office building. Under the guidance of the reception secretary, Mrs. Pascal, she entered an independent office and met the legendary first rose of the empire. Mendelman is a legend of the empire. She is extremely beautiful, but being the most outstanding female representative of the empire has nothing to do with beauty. This lady is a high-level extraordinary person who is very rare throughout the entire empire. She is full of fighting spirit. This lady is wearing an imperial army uniform, just like a blooming rose. Her beautiful eyes are full of anger, and the fighting spirit on her body is condensed like substance, so strong that it is almost ignited. Several clerks in the room are trembling with fear. There are dozens of documents scattered on the floor of the office, which makes the room a little messy. Charlotte didn't bother to peek at the beauty of the first rose of the empire. She nodded slightly to her colleagues in the room, hurriedly picked up the documents on the floor and started working. He had experienced the baptism of internet beauties in his previous life. Although Miss Mendelman's appearance can be called perfect without dead angles, it is not enough to shock the clerk of the central government office, who has lived 2 lives. On the way here, Charlotte took the time to read the content of the letter. In addition to being an identity certificate, it also briefly described his work, assisting the warden's office of Kilmainham Prison to organize case files. As we all know, the best way to ease office embarrassment is to pretend to be busy at work, and of course you can be really busy. Although Charlotte studied mathematics education at university and had little knowledge of statistics, archival science and library science, he was still able to show his talents in this ancient country. He was busy and soon sorted out all the documents on the floor and on the desk. After Charlotte came in, Mendelman had been suppressing his anger and watching this calm clerk coldly. When Charlotte finished sorting out the documents, she asked, "I want to know what happened on March 18th. Charlotte said calmly, "There are a total of 28 documents related to March 18th, concentrated in 4 years. Miss Mendelman needs all the information, or a certain year. The 31st year of the Black Moon Lady era, a total of 21, find them all." Charlotte's expression was calm, but her heart was about to burst. When he was sorting out just now, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. When he found the 21 documents, Mendelman grabbed them and a bright flame came out of his hand. The flame of fighting spirit turned all the documents into ashes in an instant. She clapped her hands and said, "Find me more documents about the night window incident." Charlotte said nothing and easily found 7 documents according to the lady's instructions. Mendelman glanced at the rest of the documents in the room and said, "You can go away." Several clerks looked at Charlotte with gratitude as if they had been pardoned, and left the room one after another. Mendelman said, "Sort out all the documents in the room. I need all the documents about Zimmermann Axelrobin." Charlotte glanced at the several huge filing cabinets in this office and replied lightly, "Okay." At the same time, she complained in her heart, "There are really few documents in this era. You know, as a high school math teacher, he has accumulated more papers in a semester than all the documents in this room." Mendelman kept giving orders. Charlotte always completed the task perfectly. Soon, the documents in the room were reorganized. She also learned a lot of inside information that he shouldn't know, such as, "Forget it, I'd better not have these thoughts in front of Miss Mendelman. It's too dirty." Mendelman destroyed dozens of documents, glanced outside to see the sunset, and said, "Which organization sent you as an employee?" Charlotte answered calmly, "The central government office." "What's your name?" "Charlotte Mecklen." "Which college did you graduate from?" Charlotte raised her head, her tone light, but she did not hide her pride, and answered, "Sheffield University." Mendelman was finally slightly moved and asked, "Sheffield University?" Charlotte replied briefly, "Yes." The lady with the title of the first rose of the empire smiled for the first time since Charlotte entered this office, and said, "I am your senior." Charlotte also smiled back and said, "Sheffield University." Charlotte, a graduate of the 33rd year of Black Moon, greets you. The education in the empire is divided into 6 levels: primary education, secondary education, higher education, public school, national college and imperial university. Being able to complete higher education is already a rare talent in society. A poor family that raises a child who has completed higher education can proudly declare that the family has jumped into social class. Public schools are usually built with funds from the nobility, and the graduates of public schools are already separated from the common people. The National Academy is even more known as serving the royal family. It mainly trains grassroots talents for governments at all levels, and the treatment of graduates is unimaginably generous. It is probably similar to the college students in the 1950s and 1960s in the world before Charlotte traveled through. As for the Imperial University, it is completely different from the universities on Earth. There is a saying in the Imperial Education Circle, the National Academy serves the royal family and the empire, and the Imperial University serves the gods. Each university represents the favor of a god, and the status of its graduates is extremely noble. This is why Charlotte can work in the general office of the central government, earn a high salary in the empire, and have the ability to take a vacation every year. Because he graduated from the University of Sheffield, one of the only 4 universities in the Fars Empire. Mendelman nodded and smiled, and stretched out his right hand in a drooping position. Charlotte gently lifted this right hand with both hands and gently touched the other slender fingertips with her forehead. This is a very important etiquette in the empire, indicating that the man and woman have a pure friendship from now on. Chapter 4: Promotion and Salary Increase. For unmarried girls, men can only touch their foreheads with their fingertips. For married ladies, men should kiss the back of their hands. Charlotte had heard that the senior sister had been engaged, but for some well-known reason, the engagement was cancelled and she was still single. He touched her fingertips with his forehead to show his gentlemanly demeanor. Mendelman whispered, "Transfer my men." Charlotte showed a hint of resistance and whispered, "Demotion." His resentful question was just a strategy of retreating by advancing. Generally speaking, low-level government employees such as clerks will be promoted every 3 years, but if they are transferred to a new job, the promotion period will be calculated from the beginning. There has always been a saying in the imperial government that transfer without promotion is equivalent to demotion. Mendelman snorted coldly and asked, "When will you be promoted next time?" Charlotte answered without hesitation, "In a month and a half, I should be promoted to 3rd-level clerk." It is true that Charlotte graduated from the University of Sheffield. With this degree, he entered the general office of the central government and worked as a clerk with a high salary. However, he was born in a merchant family and had no connections in the officialdom. After 2 years in the general office of the central government, he has never received any additional promotion opportunities. He still has to wait for years and wait for promotion step by step. As a time traveler, Charlotte has much more courage than the natives of this world. He slightly promoted his position and said that he would be promoted again soon. It was simply audacious and earth-shattering. Mendelman rang the bell in the room, and a middle-aged officer came in soon. She pointed at Charlotte and said, "Transfer this man to Kilmainham prison. His position is the chief clerk in my office." After integrating the memories of the original owner, Charlotte was also surprised by the corruption in the imperial officialdom and the darkness of the workplace. But when corruption fell on her head and she became the beneficiary of the black box operation in the workplace, she was shocked on the surface, but excited in her heart, and had no will to resist at all. Charlotte originally thought that this senior sister promised to give him the treatment of a 2nd-level clerk and promised that he would be promoted in the future. It was already a big profit. If she directly gave him the position of a third-level clerk, it would be a leapfrog promotion. Unexpectedly, Mendelman promised the position of chief clerk. The bureaucratic system of the empire is quite complicated, divided into 53 levels. As the largest number of government employees, the imperial clerks have reached the end of their positions from the lowest 41st level first-level clerk to the highest 37th level fifth-level clerk. Only by changing jobs can they continue to be promoted. Chief clerk is the most common choice for clerks to change jobs. The first-level clerk and the fifth-level clerk are both 37th level imperial bureaucrats, but their prospects for promotion are completely different. The former's bright, while the latter is bleak. He was promoted from the 41st level clerk to the 37th level first-level clerk. It seems that he was only promoted 4 levels, but in fact he was promoted 5 levels, which also implied a promotion across classes. By the way, Mrs. Aldegant, who holds the highest authority in an office, spent a long 21 years to be promoted from the 45th level assistant to the 37th level 5th level clerk. Because she has been unable to change jobs, Mrs. Aldegant is likely to work in this position until retirement. Charlotte wanted to say, "I am willing to die for you," or, "Greetings to my lord, you." She also thought of the classic sentence, "I have been wandering for half my life, traveling through 2 worlds, and have not met a wise master. If you do not abandon me, I am willing to be your stepmother," but considering the different cultural atmospheres of the 2 worlds, he could only give up these ideas and said with a gentlemanly smile, "Please take care of me in the future, you, Mendelman." Mendelman nodded slightly and said, "You are exhausted today. Go home and rest first. You will move to the prison tomorrow. You will have to work overtime in the next few days. Remember to bring enough daily necessities." Charlotte didn't care. Isn't it just overtime? It was as if he had never worked overtime in his previous life. High school math teachers don't work 996, but staying up late to correct homework is a common thing. The intensity of work is not inferior to others. Seeing that Mendelman didn't say anything else, Charlotte left the office and hurriedly left Kilmainham prison. There is no public carriage that stops when you wave at the Marne district. Charlotte could only walk to another district before she met a public carriage. She waved it to stop and returned to her residence in the Alexander district. Although the Alexander district is far inferior to the Val d'Oise district, it is also one of the upper 7 districts of Strasbourg, the capital of the empire. The main residents are wealthy businessmen. The community is quite prosperous and there are several large shopping malls and markets. Charlotte rented an apartment in the Alexander district. This apartment was built by the Savings Association and is called the Savings Association apartment. It is specially provided to single young people with a certain amount of savings. The living environment is very high quality and the services provided are also very complete. This is the first time that Charlotte has visited the Savings Association apartment. The last time he came here, he was still a different person. Charlotte seemed to be familiar with the place, but in fact he was very nervous when he entered the apartment. The doorman of the apartment smiled very friendly and did not question him. Charlotte breathed a sigh of relief and went up to the 2nd floor. Because the lower floors facing the street are relatively noisy, the rent is slightly cheaper. He opened the door with a key, pushed open his room, and couldn't help shaking his head. The room was quite messy. The original owner was not a clean person. In addition to the men's clothes scattered everywhere, there were also some messy women's clothes in the room. According to the memory prompt, these clothes came from different women, and their appearance and names had long been blurred. Charlotte tidied them up and separated the men's clothes from the women's clothes. She planned to wash all the clothes that belonged to her and throw away those that did not belong to him tomorrow morning. Sitting on a rattan chair in the room, Charlotte suddenly had a breakdown. She didn't want to say anything or do anything. She just wanted to stay quietly for a while. He inexplicably crossed over, changed his identity, and came to a completely unfamiliar world. This is a world with gods. He is definitely a heretic. Charlotte Mecklen was worried almost every minute that a stranger would suddenly jump out of the street, shouting that he would punish her on behalf of the gods, put herself on the fire, pour kerosene on her, and set her on fire. Well, there is also the evil god. The predecessor died from summoning the evil god. Every him in this world is dangerous. Perhaps if he fails to deal with it properly, his spirit will be polluted, he will turn into a monster, or even disappear into ashes. The burden he feels is beyond words. Today is the first day that Charlotte returns from vacation, and also the first day that he tries his new life. He chooses to integrate into this world instead of resisting. This day has an unusually perfect start. This start even exceeded Charlotte's expectations. Chapter 5 Zimmerman Axel Robin. Charlotte could not have imagined that she would be sent to Kilmainham prison on official business, and that she would be appreciated by her senior Miss Mandelman, and even get an unexpected promotion and salary increase. However, no matter how perfect the start was, it could not relieve the pressure in her heart. The room gradually became dark. Charlotte did not turn on the light, and there was no light to turn on. There were no street lights on the road outside the window. It was pitch black at night, which was very different from the world he came from. Every city has street lights. After nightfall, the lights are bright, even brighter than the stars in the sky. Such a world is a thing of the past. After a long time, Charlotte clenched her fists lightly, waved them a little, and whispered, "Teacher Wang Haishen, you did a good job today, please keep working hard tomorrow, come on." He gave himself an encouragement, took out a kerosene lighter, gently turned the gear, rubbed the flint, and lit an oil lamp in the room. There is no light to turn on, but there is a lamp to burn. Although it is dim, an oil lamp is also a lamp. Charlotte looked around for a while. This was his room. The Savings Club apartment was only for single young people, so the layout of the apartment was one room. It had a separate bathroom, which meant that there was already a sewer system in this era, but there was no separate kitchen. He could only use a kerosene stove to make coffee, some soup, or simple oatmeal. The layout of the room was a combination of a bedroom and a study. There was a desk, not too big but big enough for writing, a wardrobe for clothes, and a single sofa. When Charlotte saw the gas stove, she couldn't help feeling a little hungry. She hadn't eaten all day. Miss Mandelman seemed to have forgotten about it. She didn't eat anything either, and naturally she wouldn't prepare food for Charlotte. Charlotte stood up, lit the kerosene stove under the dim kerosene lamp, and found a few potatoes, some vegetables that looked like peas, a bottle of condiments that looked and smelled like curry, and half a loaf of hard black bread in the room. There was no electricity in this era, but the apartment had running water. Charlotte filled half a pot with water, peeled and diced the potatoes, threw in a handful of peas, added 2 tablespoons of seasoning, and when the water boiled, broke up the black bread and threw it in. A few minutes later, he served the dinner on a plate. To be honest, it tasted terrible. But Charlotte had been hungry for a day, so she didn't care about the taste. She quickly ate up the whole pot of food and boiled half a pot of water to make some black tea. The black tea was also a stock, and the taste was very strong, which was very different from the black tea on earth. It had a bit of the taste of pepper water mixed with chili peppers, which was very strange and refreshing. Charlotte frowned and took a sip, sat back in the rattan chair, took out the diary, hesitated for a moment, and didn't open it. After returning from Senes, he handed his luggage to the imperial post for shipping, and only brought this diary with him. Because he found this diary before leaving, Charlotte only quickly flipped through the last few pages and confirmed that its original owner died from summoning the evil god, but had not yet carefully browsed the whole picture. The light of the oil lamp was weak. Under such lighting conditions, he didn't want to see anything, as it was bad for his eyesight. What was more worrying was that this diary was tainted with the aura of the evil god. His predecessor died from summoning the evil god, so he might have seen some unclean things. Sipping the black tea, Charlotte slowly recalled the documents he had seen during the day to pass the time. To be honest, he didn't expect to see so many explosive secrets. Most of these documents were related to one person. Zimmerman Axel Robin. This guy was born noble, and his original name was Zimmerman Robin. 5 years ago, Cyrus Robin assisted King Axel and ascended the throne of the king from a commoner. With loyalty and bravery, iron blood and merit, he became the eternal successor of the highest title of the Fars Empire. Before Cyrus came out, the Robin family was the oldest noble family in the Ingrima Empire. The family has produced countless scholars, military strategists, adventurers, as well as peerless generals and rampant swordsmen. In the newly born Fars Empire, the power, prestige and status of the Robin family surpassed those of the Inglimmer Empire. Zimmerman showed his talent from a young age. He entered Habisk Public School at the age of 6, graduated with first place in the 3rd year, and was admitted to the First National Academy. All public schools in the Empire implement the credit system, and the average time to complete all courses is 6.5 years. Habisk Public School is the top-ranked public school in the Empire. The academic requirements are particularly strict. There are many students who can complete their studies in more than 8 years, and even students who take more than 10 years are not uncommon. Zimmerman was able to complete his studies in 3 years and get the first place in graduation, which is enough to be proud of all his peers. It is not a compliment to say that he is the future star of the empire. Charlotte graduated in 5 years, but his graduation score ranked 89th, and the Lemon public school he attended was far inferior to Habisk, and was only a second-rate school. Zimmerman Robin's resume is not limited to this. At the age of 13, he calmly completed his studies at the First National Academy and was admitted to the Royal Hogwitch University with amazing results. As a rare genius in the Royal Hogwitch University in a century, he completed his studies before the age of 20. After graduation, he declined the generous job assignment and chose to join the Imperial Navy. Within a year, he was promoted from the captain of a third-level ship to the commander of a naval fleet with 5 warships. He commanded the fleet to sweep 8 pirate fleets in succession and captured the Dongli Kingdom, which had always been a headache for the empire, making it an overseas vassal state of the empire. Originally, he should have become the governor of Dongli Kingdom, but this guy refused the appointment and rebelled. He joined the largest pirate group. This proud child of heaven immediately became the #1 thief on the empire's bounty list, with a bounty of 500,000 gold ecu, unprecedented. Before he was on the list, the bounty for the first-ranked pirate king was only 116,000 gold acres, and the bounties for the top 10 pirates added up to only 486,000 gold acres. At that time, the empire was swept by an indescribable craze, and no one could guess why he would give up his bright future and degenerate. The king was furious and humiliated the patriarch of the Robin family several times in public. The patriarch announced in anger that his surname would be abolished, and declared in the newspaper, "The Robin family will never accept traitors from the empire." No one could have imagined that this daring guy would do something even more earth-shattering. Less than half a year after Zimmerman Robin joined the Pirate King fleet, he challenged the Pirate King head-on, and killed the Pirate King who had been famous for more than 50 years and could even compete with the Imperial Navy in a well-designed public occasion. It took him 3 years to unify the 16 pirate fleets of the 7 seas and became the new Pirate King with lofty prestige. Then, Zimmerman Robin made a shocking decision. He commanded the Pirate Union fleet to return to the Empire. Chapter 6: The Imperial Rose Incident. It is said that when the Pirate King's flag flew outside the Empire's largest port, Minforst, a general of the Imperial Navy, was so scared that he peed his pants. At that time, there were less than 20 warships resting in Minforst. The returning pirate fleet had 300 warships of various sizes. It was large in scale and powerful in combat, enough to flatten the Empire's largest port in one battle. It marched quickly along the port and could attack the imperial capital of Strasbourg in a week. At that time, every resident and every merchant in this busy port city was heartbroken, thinking that the end of the world was coming, and less than 50% of the soldiers could muster the courage to fight. When the Pirate King's flagship and his warships raised the surrender flag, Minforst was like the grandest festival. Everyone was so happy that they exploded, and countless people rushed to the streets to sing and dance. Zimmerman Robin led the pirate fleet back and returned to the arms of the Empire, and his reputation was unparalleled. In just a few years, Zimmerman Robin's reputation fell from the peak to the bottom, and then suddenly rose from the bottom to a height that even with his extraordinary talent, he should never reach in his lifetime. His young life can be called a legend in the Empire. In that year, Zimmerman Robin. His fame was so great that it even rivaled that of his ancestor Salos's Robin 5 years ago. He was regarded as the most unruly person in the world and was destined to be remembered in history. When the king met Zimmerman Robin, he smiled and said, "Except for the throne. You can ask me for any reward." At that time, Zimmerman asked for something that no one could have thought of. He refused to return to the Robin family and asked the king for the surname Axel, changing his name from Zimmerman Robin to Zimmerman Axel Robin. After commanding the fleet to return to the Empire, Zimmerman Axel Robin seemed to have completed all his life goals, and his entire personality changed strangely. Before he led the fleet to revolt, Zimmerman Axel Robin was a taciturn man who was obsessed with his studies, regarded all entertainment as unnecessary, was strict with self-discipline, and had an old-fashioned style. His teacher described Zimmerman: his schedule was as precise as a clock, and his life was as self-disciplined as a saint. This guy had nothing to do except study and truth. Zimmerman, who returned to the Empire, seemed to have given up all his disguises. In just a few days, He became the most experienced playboy in the empire. Mendelman Sumri, Charlotte's legendary senior, was once Zimmerman's fiancée. One day, she went to visit her mother and saw Zimmerman working hard on her mother. The scene at that time was regarded by Mendelman as a great shame. The first Rose of the Empire, who was extremely angry, drew her sword on the spot and wanted to duel with this playboy. Charlotte saw things that she shouldn't have seen for a whole day. He knew why Miss Mendelman wanted to burn those documents. If this matter had not been spread so widely, Charlotte even doubted whether the senior would kill to silence the witnesses. With the senior's family background and status, it was not a serious crime in the empire to kill several first-level clerks of the 41st rank. The duel did not go on as scheduled. After Zimmerman Axelrobin sent Mrs. Shirley to the peak of bliss, he rolled over and broke the window and disappeared from Mendelman's sight at the fastest speed. The Imperial Rose had no time to stop this lewd and shameless bastard. Mendelman issued a public statement the next day, not only to tear up the engagement, but also to fight a life-and-death duel with Zimmerman Axelrobin. The most outstanding Imperial Rose had countless loyal ministers willing to run for her and challenge her former fiancé on her behalf. Within a day, Zimmerman Axelrobin received hundreds of duel letters. No matter where he appeared, someone would block him and ask for a duel on the street. As a descendant of the Robin family, Zimmerman Axelrobin has inherited the family's true swordsmanship, and his ferocity and viciousness even surpassed that of his ancestor in his heyday 500 years ago. Zimmerman won several street duels, but in the 18th duel, he was angered by a challenger and killed someone in the street. After that duel, he never held back in all his challenges. He fought 115 duels and killed 115 enemies, which completely offended most of the nobles in the empire. After all, those who were qualified to challenge him were all noble children of the empire and were of noble origin. This large-scale duel with a wide impact was known in history as the Imperial Rose Incident. It marked the dividing line in Zimmerman Axelrobin's life and the beginning of his great fall. Zimmerman seemed to have become unreasonable overnight. Not only did he want to defeat his enemies in the duel, but after almost every duel, he would provoke the opponent's older women, including but not limited to, mother, aunt, elder sister, cousin. If there was really no one to do, he would not care about his younger sister, cousin, and even the younger sister of a family friend, and other relatives. He fell from a great noble of the empire to a prisoner who committed 257 crimes, such as murder, rape, arson, robbery, theft, kidnapping, intimidation, etc. He even broke the empire's criminal record. If it weren't for his previous great merits and the emperor's 7 consecutive pardons, Mr. Zimmerman would have been on the gallows long ago. Charlotte recalled the document for a while, and he suddenly felt that this was life. Compared with Mr. Zimmerman, even if he had traveled through time again, his life was a little boring and uninteresting. Zimmerman Axelrobin is now imprisoned in Kilmainham prison. What awaits him may be the 8th pardon of the emperor, or a sentence of execution. Charlotte rubbed his eyebrows and no longer wanted to force himself to drink the black tea of this world. He decided to buy some other tea tomorrow, such as the flower tea shipped from Dungli. Putting down the teacup, Charlotte took off his clothes, climbed onto the bed, and soon fell into deep sleep. The next day, Charlotte rubbed his eyes in the morning light and woke up. He slept very comfortably that night. He climbed out of the bed, washed a little, changed his clothes, and packed the dirty clothes and put them at the door. The maids of the Savings Association apartment will take away the dirty clothes left by the tenants at the door, wash and iron them, and then return them. The cost will be included in the rent and settled once a month. After tidying up the room a little, Charlotte did not have time to deal with the women's clothes at home, and hurriedly left the apartment. He still had to go through some work procedures today. There is no office informationization in this era, and all official processes need to be completed by manpower. Chapter 7 Prison Armies Issued Weapons. This is also the fundamental reason why Charlotte dared to lie openly. If you want to check the information of an imperial bureaucrat, you need to look through the files specifically. In the Fars Empire where catalog retrieval is not popularized, looking through the files is a hard job, and no one can expose his lies on the spot. Charlotte also didn't believe that anyone would look up the files afterwards. Just to catch this worm like him, there would be too many people to offend, and the entire bureaucratic system would resist error correction. Charlotte went back to the central government office first, and bought some bagels for breakfast on the way. It's a pity that there are no shops along the street selling fresh cow and sheep milk in the entire Fars Empire, otherwise it would be even more perfect. While eating bagels, Charlotte pushed open the office, met Mrs. Aldigan, and showed the transfer order she received yesterday. Mrs. Aldigan was quite surprised and tried to persuade him to stay. The working environment and promotion opportunities in Kilmainham prison are not as good as those in the central government office. Do you want to consider it more? Charlotte shrugged helplessly and said, if I could refuse, I would have refused long ago. Mrs. Aldigan sighed and signed her name. Colleagues in the office all had a gloating expression, and several of them secretly thought in their hearts, it's a good thing that Charlotte went, otherwise the unlucky person who was transferred to Kilmainham prison might be me. This transfer order did not include Charlotte's specific position after being transferred to Kilmainham prison. Charlotte would not deliberately show off. This was an unnecessary and childish behavior that would only bring trouble to her career. He hurriedly left the office where he had stayed for 2 years and visited the personnel department again. In less than an hour, he ran all the procedures, left the central government office, waved for a public carriage, and went straight to Kilmainham prison. This was Charlotte's second visit to the oldest prison in the empire. With the help of his reception secretary, Mrs. Pascal, he quickly completed the entry procedures and became a bureaucrat of the 37th rank of the empire, a first-class clerk in the office of the warden of Kilmainham prison. As a former first-class clerk of the empire, a 41st-rank state employee, Charlotte's weekly salary was 1 valor and 70 centimes. After being promoted to first-class clerk of the empire, a 37th-rank state employee, his weekly salary increased to 6 valor and 15 centimes, about 3.6 times the original amount. Converted into the purchasing power of the earth, it is equivalent to a monthly salary of nearly 50,000 yuan, which is already a high-income group at the golden collar level. After finishing his duties, Charlotte thanked Mrs. Pascal and asked politely, where should I work? He certainly couldn't work with Miss Mandelman, which was against the rules. As a clerk, he should theoretically have his own independent office, and Charlotte was looking forward to the new working environment. Mrs. Pascal smiled and said, you also need to collect the prison guard's equipment, including pistols, canes and swords. Although you are a civilian, you are also a prison soldier. You are likely to encounter threats in battles, so these things are indispensable. Charlotte couldn't help asking, will you encounter violence in Kilmainham prison? Mrs. Pascal smiled and said, the last time there was violence in the prison was before Lady Blackmoon took over the sanctuary. However, please don't refuse weapons. Charlotte smiled and replied, I don't refuse weapons. He has been transferred from the government office, which is not dangerous, to a prison affiliated with a state violence agency. Holding weapons is an inevitable option. Of course, Charlotte doesn't think that there will be danger here. There are not many safe places in the entire empire than Kilmainham prison. He followed Mrs. Pascal to the weapons room. A middle-aged soldier with a full beard muttered, another newcomer. Madame Pascal replied, the chief clerk who was personally transferred by the warden. The middle-aged soldier with a full beard chuckled and said, then take care of this little guy. Follow me. Madame Pascal said, my work ends here, and I wish you good luck. Your office is next to the warden, and your name is on the door. Charlotte hurriedly turned around, smiled politely, said goodbye to Madame Pascal, and watched the lady leave. The middle-aged soldier with a full beard waited for a while and said, do you want standard weapons or some special goods? Charlotte raised her eyebrows and asked, what's the difference? The middle-aged soldier with a full beard replied, there will be some confiscated weapons in the weapons room, and the quality is slightly higher than the standard weapons. Charlotte asked, can I pick them myself? The middle-aged soldier with a full beard smiled and said, whatever you want. He took Charlotte into the weapons room, pointed with his hand, and said, these are all standard weapons. The small room at the back is for confiscated items. The hint of the bearded man was very obvious. The small room inside stored extraordinary weapons. This world has gods, magical creatures, forbidden ancient creations, giants, barbarian witches, blood races, magic, fighting spirit, alchemy, extraordinary people and extraordinary items. Of course, there couldn't be any particularly sophisticated supernatural weapons in the prison army's weapons room of Kilmainham prison. The best ones must have been snatched up by powerful people long ago, but the remaining ones were also extremely precious and could not be easily obtained outside. After crossing over, Charlotte had never seen supernatural items. In his memory, the price of every supernatural item was extremely expensive. For example, The most common and cheapest magic lamp on the market, which could only be used for lighting, also cost 12 IQ, far exceeding his salary. Supernatural weapons that can be used in combat are often worth more than 100 IQ, which is equivalent to more than 2 million yuan in purchasing power in RMB, equivalent to an ordinary house in a medium-sized city. Unless there is a huge amount of extra money, Charlotte will never have the urge to consume such expensive luxury goods in her lifetime. The weapon rack outside is full of various guns. The technology of manufacturing firearms in this world has developed rapidly. The performance of gunpowder weapons is close to the level of World War I on Earth, and the design is even better than that of Earth in the 2000s. The Empire does not have a violent institution called the police. All the work that the police should do is done by the military. The soldiers serving in prisons are officially called prison soldiers. The pistols issued to prison soldiers are officially called magnum handguns, which have a capacity of 18 rounds and excellent close combat performance. There is also a shotgun similar to a shotgun on Earth, called the Thunder Gun, which is loaded with explosive bombs and is a street-fighting heavy firepower that is deeply loved by the prison soldiers. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: The Unspoken Rules of Kilmainham Prison. After the gun rack, there is a display rack for cold weapons, mainly canes, rapiers and short knives. Among them, the cane is the most common, because it is the only weapon that has the function of daily necessities and can be carried with you at ordinary times. There are about 5 kinds of standard canes issued by the Imperial Army. The metal canes used on the battlefield are heavy, and when swung, they are very powerful, enough to smash a person's skull. There is a bayonet hidden inside for close combat. The red pear wood cane used for law enforcement is hard in texture, but cheap. The most important thing is that it is naturally reddish in wood. The longer it is rubbed, the redder it becomes. When enforcing the law, dozens of red pear wood canes are flying, which is quite eye-catching. There is also a short wooden cane, which is not suitable for combat itself, but you can pull out a dagger by holding the head of the cane. The official name is a convenient military cane, commonly known as a short cane sword. It is deeply loved by soldiers and is also widely circulated in the civilian market. It is the standard of gangs in many regions. When underground gangs fight, almost all of them are this kind of military short cane sword. The other 2 types of military walking sticks are relatively crude, mainly equipped to engineers and logistics soldiers, and there is no stock here. In addition to walking sticks, short knives and rapiers are also common weapons. The rapier of the Empire is similar to the swift sword on Earth, but the blade is thicker and wider, and the weight is heavier. The wrist guard is not so gorgeous, and the swordsmanship is similar to Western swordsmanship, but it focuses more on steps, is faster, and has more slashing moves. It is a pure killing skill. Starting from the public school, there will be swordsmanship classes in the school, and the main thing taught is the swordsmanship of the rapier. Charlotte is not a master of swordsmanship, at most she can be considered a skilled one. There is no problem with the basic form, but she can only use it in combat. The weather is really good, but her gun skills are not bad. She can't be called a sharpshooter, but she can put out a candle within 20 steps. He didn't continue to look at these standard weapons and entered the small room at the back. The voice of the bearded soldier came from behind. If you choose one weapon, for the sake of the warden, no additional requirements will be made. If you choose 2 weapons, you have to sell one, but you can only keep half of the income. If you choose 3 weapons, you can keep 2. The upper limit is 3. Charlotte smiled slightly, without looking back, and said, 3, why did Mrs. Pascal personally send him here and leave before he chose a weapon? The reason behind it is meaningful. This is the unspoken rule. It belongs to the unspoken rule of Kilmainham Prison. Charlotte has no intention of fighting against the unspoken rule. He traveled to this world and just wanted to go with the flow and didn't want to change it. The bearded soldier whispered, not a bad newcomer. The footsteps rustled, and he turned and walked away. Charlotte thought for a while and began to look at the small room where the confiscated weapons were hidden. It was surrounded by wooden shelves. The quality of the wood was very average. There were not many things on it, only 30 or 40 pieces. Among these few exhibits, there were almost no hot weapons, and most of them were heavily mottled with years. Charlotte was soon attracted by a small hand axe. Blood-sucking weapon. Charlotte picked up the hand axe in surprise. He had never expected to see such a weapon. The hand axe was only half an arm long, shorter than a short cane sword, and dark red all over. That was the natural color of the blood steel produced by the vampires. It was well forged, and there were complex patterns on the axe blade and handle. Charlotte had learned relevant knowledge in college and knew that this was the decoration of the Van Gogh family. Blood-sucking weapons are almost all produced by the vampires. It is said that the blood cores of high-level vampires above the Baron are needed to forge such chival weapons. They are very rare in the vampires. The holders are often great nobles in the vampires. Each blood-sucking weapon is an heirloom of these inhuman monsters. It is not certain that one of the hundreds of ordinary vampire warriors owns one. It can suck the essence of the enemy's blood, providing the owner with endless power, which is extremely advantageous in battle. On the human side, blood-sucking weapons are even rarer. It is a weapon exclusive to the vampires. Only in the hands of the vampires can it activate the ability to suck the enemy's blood. Not only can holders of other races not activate the blood-sucking ability, but they will even be sucked of their vitality by the blood-sucking weapon. In the human empire, blood-sucking weapons are known as the weapons that can defeat evil. Except for a very small number of collectors, almost no one is interested in this thing. He clenched the small and exquisite hand axe, took a deep breath, and his palm suddenly felt a slight tingling. Charlotte Mecklen is also a supernormal. He has a few supernormal abilities. The strange energy he possesses is called bloody glory. While studying at the University of Sheffield, Charlotte Mecklen took a very ancient and unpopular supernormal secret method. When the bloody glory was activated, the hand axe suddenly glowed with a strange red light. After returning from Senes, the bloody glory in his body has been growing every day, and now it is no longer imperceptible and vague. Public schools only teach some mundane martial arts, but national colleges teach night-breathing methods, instruct students to condense power seeds, and guide students to awaken fighting spirit. Universities go a step further, get in touch with extraordinary knowledge, and embark on the path of pursuing the truth. Although there may not be 1 or 2 college students out of 100 who can master extraordinary power when they graduate, this is still the only gift from God. Bloody glory is a supernatural path developed by humans learning from vampires. It is the only power that can activate blood-sucking weapons besides vampires. It is also a combat skill created specifically for hunting vampires. Most vampires hate bloody glory. The original Mr. Charlotte Mecklen chose it, not because of any hatred towards vampires, but just because of a small reason. Bloody glory is one of the few supernatural powers that can increase charm value, and it also has a certain effect of extending the time limit. Well, this is very Charlotte. He tried to open the supernatural many times in 4 years of college but failed, so he tried the dangerous summoning evil gods. He succeeded, completed the spirit awakening ceremony, and officially became a supernatural. He also failed, and his soul was taken away by the evil god. Wang Heisheng came through and inherited everything. Charlotte looked at it carefully for a long time, and without hesitation, listed this blood-sucking weapon as the first choice. He had never thought of accumulating an extraordinary weapon with his salary, especially a blood-sucking weapon that could resonate with bloody glory. Even if the funds were sufficient, such a thing was more unimaginable than winning the lottery. What's more, the newly promoted first-level clerk didn't have much money, so how could he miss such an opportunity suddenly? Putting away the blood-sucking hand axe, Charlotte walked around the room and picked 2 more things. One was a relatively rare cold weapon, a multi-headed flail. The other was an old magic rapier. Charlotte chose the weapon and left the armory proudly. He handed the old magic rapier to the bearded soldier, who took the thing, checked the other 2 items in Charlotte's hand, registered them, and never cared about him again. Chapter 9, Weapon Selection. Charlotte suppressed her nervousness and followed Mrs. Pascal's instructions. She soon found her office. It was an independent office with a large area. There was even a large window that could see the street outside Kilmainham prison. However, most of it was occupied by filing cabinets. Despite this, Charlotte was very satisfied. It was obviously much easier to work with filing cabinets than with colleagues. At least there would be no intrigue in the office. Filing cabinets are all good kids. He put the 2 things he chose on his desk. Charlotte could not use a flail, let alone a multi-headed flail. He liked this thing because it was made of meteorite iron, a rare material. Even if it was sold as scrap iron, it could be worth dozens of IQ. Charlotte planned to sell this multi-headed flail on the black market and buy a batch of weapons. The standard pistol of the army was only 2 or 3 furs at most. The price of a rapier was a little expensive, but a cane could be done with a few centimes. After selling the multi-headed flail and buying a few standard weapons, Charlotte could still have a few dozen crowns left, making a small fortune. Obviously, not every newcomer to Kilmainham prison can have this extra income. Needless to say, it was Miss Mendelman who favored Charlotte and gave her the opportunity to enjoy such a preferential treatment. Whether there will be opportunities to make this kind of extra money in the future depends on whether he can win the favor of the senior sister and whether there is an opportunity to go on special missions. Charlotte did not look at the multi-headed flail again, but played with a blood-sucking hatchet for a long time, and liked this weapon more and more. On this day, Miss Mendelman did not arrive at Kilmainham prison until noon, and immediately assigned Charlotte extremely heavy clerical tasks, making him busy on the first day of his new job. Originally, Charlotte was looking forward to working overtime with the senior sister, but at night, he just wanted to find a place to sleep for a while, even if it was a stone floor. This busy state lasted for a week and 3 days. Mendelman, who had finished his work, gave Charlotte a day off. This was the first time he went home from his new job. When Charlotte left Kilmainham prison, she felt deeply that whether on Earth or in another world, being able to get off work on time was a kind of happiness in the world. After returning to the Savings Association apartment, he had a good sleep. The next day, after getting up, after filling her stomach a little, Charlotte left the Savings Association apartment and went straight to her alma mater, the University of Sheffield. Charlotte did not want to go back to her alma mater to relive the old days. He was going to take a look at the weapons market near the University of Sheffield. As a prison soldier, it is impossible not to carry weapons, which would make him an outlier. The weapons market near the University of Sheffield is relatively good quality and cheap. Charlotte rarely took a public carriage and chose to walk. The main target customers of the weapons market near the University of Sheffield are naturally the students of the University of Sheffield and nearby residents. When he was in college, Charlotte often came here to hang out. Although he hardly bought anything, he was very familiar with this place. At that time, there was no need for personal weapons. The school had teaching weapons. He was not a martial arts enthusiast and had no need to buy personal weapons. When he arrived at the weapons market, Charlotte walked around for a while, wandered in front of a store selling second-hand weapons, and stepped into the door of this store. He still remembered that this store often had good second-hand goods, but the owner always cheated people and had a bad reputation. The owner of this shop didn't remember Charlotte, an idle customer who had never made any purchases. He greeted her with a smile and said, "We have the best weapons in Strasbourg. Whether you need a rapier, a saber, a knight's lance, or a shield, we have everything here, and the quality is the best." Charlotte sneered in her heart and thought to herself, "Your shop mainly buys and resells second-hand weapons, selling inferior weapons at a low price and passing them off as good ones. You don't even have your own weapons workshop. What do you say is the best quality? It's just to deceive outsiders." He didn't expose the shop owner's trick. He smiled slightly and said, "I need a pistol, or a cane. What do you recommend?" The shop owner immediately lost interest. It was difficult to sell a second-hand pistol at a high price, because brand new pistols were not expensive and the price was quite transparent. As for the cane, why would he care about a few centimes? He called a clerk over and said, "This is our best clerk. Please ask him to recommend some suitable weapons for you." This move was exactly what Charlotte wanted. This shop owner was cunning enough and difficult to deal with, but his clerk was easier to deal with. Charlotte ignored the clerk who kept recommending lousy goods. She walked around the store and was slightly disappointed. It seemed that there was no good goods to get a bargain this time. Charlotte was about to leave the store and go to another weapon store. His eyes lit up slightly. He saw a gray rapier, casually placed in the corner, together with more than 10 rapiers. He strode over, grabbed the rapier and pulled it out gently. After just one look, he laughed and said, "Is it a fake antique?" The clerk hurriedly said, "This is a real antique." "You really know what's good?" Charlotte couldn't help but smile and said, "If it is really an old item from the Sherlock dynasty, it must be priced in ducats." "Are you really going to offer me a few ducats?" The clerk hesitated for a while and said, "It is indeed a real item. I will never let you take it away without 5 ducats. Charlotte threw the rapier back to its place and said, "The most I'll give is 50 centimes." Seeing that Charlotte was not in a hurry about this antique sword and looked bored and ready to leave, The clerk couldn't help but say, even if it is a fake antique, it doesn't make sense to sell it so cheaply. 3 ducats and 50 centimes is the greatest sincerity of our store. It can't be any less. Sherlock waved his hand and was about to leave. The clerk gritted his teeth and shouted, 1 ducat, 1 ducat. Sir, this is really a discount. It can't be any cheaper. Charlotte left an address and left proudly. As a formal employee of the government, he had a fixed residence and could place an order. He only needed to pay the money when the goods were delivered. He did not have to pay on the spot. As a graduate of Sheffield University, Sherlock had received a rigorous liberal education. The Sherlock dynasty, also known as the Magic Dynasty, was famous for its magic rapiers. Later, it was destroyed by King Axel, and the magic rapier craftsmanship of the Sherlock dynasty was lost. The antique rapiers of the Sherlock dynasty that are now circulating in the world are all fine products and are priced in gold écus. Chapter 10, Home Invasion and Murder. The bid for a well-preserved antique rapier of the Sherlock dynasty will never be less than 180 gold écus, and even a few fine products can be sold for more than 300 écus. Because of this, there are many imitation antique rapiers of the Sherlock dynasty on the market. The magic rapier that Charlotte bought is 100% a replica. He is willing to buy this imitation antique rapier for only one reason, that is, this rapier is equipped with a real scabbard from the Sherlock dynasty. The scabbard of the Sherlock dynasty is even rarer than the intact magic rapier. Because it is too rare and not a real treasure, no one speculates on it. Very few people know that some of the accessories of the scabbard of the Sherlock dynasty are made of the same steel as the magic rapier. Only the original scabbard can cover the magic fluctuations of the magic rapier so that it will not be detected by the enemy in advance. It is just that it is not enchanted and is not a magic item. The collectors in the Fars Empire wanted their collections to be known to everyone, so they would replace the scabbards with new ones to improve their quality. The original scabbards that were too old and seriously damaged would often be disposed of and ended up in second-hand weapon shops. On Earth, if you go to any antique park, you will find scammers who are good at antique arts. It is almost impossible to find a real antique. But in the Fars Empire, in the Middle Ages, there were no real antique dealers, only second-hand junk shops, where such unnoticed antiques often flowed out. Charlotte was going to find a reliable blacksmith to melt the scabbard and temper it into a new rapier. If a little meteorite iron could be added, the quality would be better than that of a military rapier, but the whole process would be very troublesome. Charlotte wandered around the weapons market for a while and bought a second-hand Magnum hand shuttle and 20 bullets for 89 centimes. The boss also gave her a rib holster that could be hidden in a coat. The black market price of a brand new Magnum handshake is only 2 or 3 furs at most, and the price of a second-hand Magnum handshake that is 90% new is half that. The one Charlotte bought was super cheap, so it was naturally more worn out. It was only 80% new, but there were no damaged parts. He also test-fired it once, and the accuracy was perfect. Charlotte didn't think she would use it often, so she didn't care whether it was new or old, as long as it was enough. After getting 2 weapons, Charlotte equipped the blood-sucking hand axe with a leather sheath that was convenient to carry, left the weapons market, and walked back to the Savings Association apartment. As soon as she arrived downstairs of the apartment, Charlotte felt a little uneasy. There were 4 or 5 patrol carriages parked downstairs of the Savings Association apartment, and more than 10 military horses were tied. Several patrol soldiers were chatting beside the carriages. Obviously, something had happened. He went up to greet her in a friendly manner and said, "I am Charlotte Mecklen, a first-class clerk in the central government office. I am a tenant living here. I want to know what happened here." Charlotte was too young. She could easily be mistaken for a liar if she claimed to be a clerk. Secondly, Kilmainham prison was definitely not as good as the central government office, so he reported an outdated identity. Several patrol soldiers looked at each other, laughed together, and said, "There has been a home robbery, and someone has died. We will be able to deal with it soon, Mr. Mecklen." Charlotte was still a little uneasy and asked, "Can I go home?" Several patrol soldiers replied, "Of course there is no problem. We have already explored the scene." Charlotte entered the apartment and went up to the second floor, but saw that the corridor was full of patrol soldiers. His feeling of bad luck became stronger. When Sherlock saw his room, the door was wide open, and several patrol soldiers were standing at the door talking. He was even more certain that he was the unlucky guy. He walked forward and asked, "This is my room. May I ask what happened? A young and handsome patrolman subconsciously drew out his sword, his face alert. An older colleague held his hand and said, Dubin. This man just came back from outside. He is clean and has no blood. He should be the tenant described by the doorman, Mr. Charlotte. The patrolman drew out his sword, performed a sword flower, put the sword back into the sheath, and said in a sympathetic tone, Sir, I'm afraid you will have to go with us. There was a home burglary and homicide in your home. Someone killed a lady in your home. Charlotte couldn't help but have a slight headache and asked, Mr. Dubin, can I know the details of the case? The young patrolman replied, a gentleman and a lady came to visit you in the afternoon, and broke into the apartment despite the doorman's obstruction. The gentleman used violence to break down the door of your room, and fought with a lady in your room. The gentleman killed the lady who was traveling with him in your room and jumped out of the window to escape. It's a pity that your life has to revolve around this incident. Charlotte could roughly judge from his memory and the messy women's clothes in the room that his private life was not so pure in the past, but he did not expect that the troublemaker would come to his door so soon, and in such a serious form. He rubbed his eyebrows and asked, Can I go back to the room to check my things? The young patrol soldier nodded and made a gesture of invitation. Charlotte stepped into her room. The first thing she saw was the clothes thrown all over the floor, which were even more messy. There were bloodstains on several clothes. Obviously, a fierce fight had taken place in the room. Charlotte took a look at the multi-headed flail and blood-sucking hand axe thrown in the corner, as well as the diary on the desk, and quietly breathed a sigh of relief. She decided to carry the blood-sucking hand axe with her in the future. He turned around and left the room, and said to the apartment manager who had been standing by and accompanying the patrol soldiers, Sorry, I need a new room. The manager pondered for a moment and said helplessly, There are only a few suites in the apartment, and the prices are relatively expensive. If it is an accidental case, we will take responsibility, but this time, I am afraid that Mr. Charlotte also has some responsibility. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, I will be responsible for making up the reduced rent of this apartment for 1 year. I am going out with a few patrol soldiers now. When I come back, take me to see the new room, and please find someone to help me watch the things in the room and don't let them get lost. The manager felt much more relaxed after getting Charlotte's promise, and said, I will let Mary wait here for you to come back. As you know, Mary has always been very reliable. Charlotte nodded and said to the two patrol soldiers, I can cooperate with the investigation at any time. Several patrol soldiers had already determined the case, and their mission was completed when Charlotte, the person involved, came back. In this era, the Far's Empire used patrol troops to perform the work of the police on Earth. There were not so many rules and detailed case handling procedures. Chapter 11 Social Relationships. In other words, the handling of cases in this era was very rough, and there was no professionalism to speak of. It was said that the case-solving rate of the patrol army was less than 3%. Theft cases relied heavily on private detectives, while robbery, kidnapping, and homicide cases almost all relied on private rewards. It was better than a society without laws, but not much better. It was a rough legal society that was not so pleasant. The patrol army hurriedly evacuated the apartment, invited Charlotte to a carriage, and rushed to the patrol army's office. Charlotte thought secretly in the carriage, I lost a few expensive ornaments, worth 1 or 2 crowns, but the probability of the murderer taking them away is relatively low. On the contrary, the possibility of being robbed by someone is higher. As for the murder case itself, Miss Mendelman must not know it anyway. Charlotte rubbed her eyebrows, feeling very troubled. A man and a woman came to the door, and there was a fight, and even murder. Even if it was not a logical private detective, it could easily be inferred that this case was probably related to the private life of the man and woman. Charlotte, himself. I'm afraid he is still a less glorious member of the triangle relationship. Mendelman had a fiancée like Zimmerman Axelrobin, so he must hate playboys and will never allow a scumbag like his ex-fiancée to work for him. Once the matter is made public, even if he can get away from this scandal, he will probably lose his job. This is not Earth, and the employees of the imperial government are not civil servants who cannot be fired at will in the future. Mendelman only needs one sentence to make Charlotte lose her well-paid job, and even make him unable to work in the government sequence again. This time is also a wake-up call. I will get rid of the multi-headed flail as soon as possible, and then buy a house somewhere else, move out of the Alexandria district, and break away from my previous social relationships. Charlotte rubbed her eyebrows and sorted out her social relationships. Charlotte Mecklen's relationship with friends is weak. There are almost no people who can be called friends, and she has a superficial relationship with everyone. His parents are both businessmen, quite wealthy, with ample financial resources. Charlotte's ability to attend the University of Sheffield is largely due to the financial support of her family. Now Charlotte's father, because of his increasingly poor health, has gradually transferred the business to his eldest son, who is also Charlotte's brother. This brother is very wary of him and has advised his father several times, give Charlotte a fortune and let him give up his inheritance rights. As long as she survives a few years and her parents pass away, Charlotte can legitimately part ways with her brother's family and never have any contact with them until death. The only person who is still tied to her is Charlotte's sister. The two siblings have a very close relationship, but this sister married far away, and there are few opportunities for contact. In addition to this brother and sister, Charlotte no longer has any direct relatives, but he does have a fiancée, and even the wedding date has been put on the agenda, which makes him a little difficult. I heard that my fiancé is very dissatisfied with this marriage and has been threatening to break off the engagement several times. You can try to add fuel to the flames. The carriage soon arrived at the office of the patrol army. It was an independent small building on the street, 3 stories high, full of Sherlock style. It was an old building from the previous dynasty, with a lot of historical vicissitudes. The routine questioning was soon over. Charlotte also confirmed the identity of the man and woman who broke into her apartment. They were a couple, named Yang Mills. He didn't know the gentleman, but he had some unspeakable relationship with Mrs. Yang Mills. As for how Mr. Yang Mills discovered the close relationship between his wife and Charlotte, and came to the door, and killed his wife in a quarrel in Tehran, it was another sad story. Fortunately, Charlotte was lingering in the weapons market at that time, otherwise it would be difficult to end the matter. The patrol army recorded Charlotte's description, put it in the archives as an auxiliary file, and issued a wanted order for Mr. Yang Mills, and the matter was completely settled. There is usually no reward for the wanted orders of the patrol army, and there are few good citizens who love life to help the patrol army catch fugitives. Whether it is the Fars Empire or other countries, including several dynasties that destroyed their countries in the past, there have been news reports that wanted orders have been issued for decades, and finally the wanted criminals themselves were found to be living leisurely in their own homes, working as usual, and everything was normal. The legal atmosphere of this era is so absurd. After leaving the patrol army office, Charlotte was exhausted physically and mentally. Although he was not a suspect in this case, he was still in a very low mood. He did not expect that his new life would be full of twists and turns. He had just been promoted and had a salary increase, but in the blink of an eye, he was involved in a murder case. He rushed back to the Savings Association apartment and gave Mary, the maid who helped him look after the house, a tip of 2 centimes. In this era, a tip of 2 centimes was already a very generous move. With the help of the administrator, he hurriedly moved into a suite on the 4th floor. He moved to the new room, lay on the sofa, breathed a sigh of relief, and felt hungry. Charlotte glanced at the sky and was sure that if she went out now, she would not be able to find any shops open, so she could only cook another pot of food that she had eaten a few days ago. The taste was as indescribable as before. After eating, Charlotte lay on the bed, subconsciously touched the diary, and then put it aside. Although he knew that the original owner's diary would help him understand his new identity, he avoided items related to the evil god, which was very contradictory. Charlotte began to think seriously and decided to plan her life in this life. Tomorrow I will ask senior sister Menelman for another day off, first sell the multi-headed flail, move to another place to live, and then buy some clothes. Charlotte threw all the blood-stained clothes, whether it was her own or those women's clothes, to the maid Mary when she moved, and did not keep them, so she was now in short supply of daily clothes and the necessary formal wear for men. Charlotte thought of moving, and couldn't help searching for memories about the upper 7th district. The house prices in Val d'Oise were too expensive, and Alexander was definitely not an option. These 2 districts had to be given up first. The other 3 districts were not an option because they were relatively far away and it was too inconvenient to go to work in the Marne. After a simple screening, Charlotte had only 2 choices, the 2 large districts between Val d'Oise and the Marne, Alcatraz and Picardy. After weighing the pros and cons, he decisively gave up the former. Alcatraz was close to Val d'Oise, so the house prices were relatively expensive, and it was a bit far from Kilmainham Prison Road where he worked. Picardy was cheaper and a little closer to work. Charlotte decided to sell the multi-headed flail tomorrow and go to the real estate bureau in Picardy to see if there were any suitable houses for sale. Chapter 12 Anne of Brittany. In this era, there are no real estate agencies in any country. Anyone who wants to sell a house can only register with a real estate bureau established by the government. If you want to buy a house, you can only go to the real estate bureau. The two parties to the transaction often do not need to meet. The seller only needs to give the real estate bureau a quotation, and the buyer pays the real estate bureau directly and pays taxes to get the real estate certificate. Charlotte thought for a while, and the sleepiness in his body gradually became irresistible. He didn't even take off his clothes and fell into a hazy dream. Dark night, long street without lights. Floating starlight, whistling long wind. Charlotte was a little confused. He looked around and didn't understand how he got outside. He was obviously lying on the bed. There's a problem. Charlotte tried to gather bloody glory. Over the past 10 days, this supernatural power has made some progress. A small vortex has condensed in the center of his eyebrows. A strange energy flows through his body, making him feel at ease. A soft voice suddenly sounded behind him. "You hurt me." Charlotte turned around in surprise and saw a very beautiful young lady. Her dress was stained with blood and her face was bruised. She looked very embarrassed. She remembered the murder case in the daytime and asked, "Are you Mrs. Yang Mills?" The young lady couldn't help laughing. It was a little weird in the night. She asked faintly, "Don't you even remember who I am? Don't you feel any guilt for letting my husband kill me?" A delicate hand rested on Sherlock's shoulder. The young lady put her face close to his, her breath was chilling, and she said, "Don't you think you should compensate me?" Charlotte smiled slightly, very calmly, and said, "You are not Mrs. Yang Mills. Otherwise you should have realized that you recognized the wrong person." A sweet laugh full of resentment rang in her ears, and the young lady shouted wildly, "Do you still want to shirk responsibility? Pretend not to know me. Please come with me to hell and relive the beautiful scenery we once had together." Charlotte closed his eyes, and the bloody glory poured into his fist. He punched out and collided with an unknown object. He clearly felt that his fist had the upper hand and knocked something away. Charlotte said in a voice that only he could hear, "It turns out that in the dream, I am still Wang Haitian." He had long realized that he was in a dream. Because his appearance returned to the previous life, with black hair and black eyes, and white and weak hands. Bloody glory belongs to the category of evil energy. There are many kinds of evil energy, but each one comes from the origin of the soul. Dreams will block pure physical energy, but they will not block the evil energy from the origin of the soul. Although bloody glory had just awakened and his cultivation was very shallow, it did not weaken in the slightest because it was a dream. A voice shouted angrily, "You are actually a transcendent." Charlotte still closed his eyes, saluted as a gentleman, and said with a smile, "Yes, damn it." Charlotte felt his body sink, opened his eyes, and saw the ceiling of the bedroom. He jumped up and opened the window. There was a carriage parked across the street. There was a lantern hanging on the carriage, which illuminated the street dimly. Charlotte jumped calmly and jumped out of the window. After 2 lives. This was the first time he tried free fall from the height of the 4th floor. He was not afraid of the whistling wind in his ears. Bloody glory infused his legs, making his legs as strong as an antelope. He landed on the ground, squatted slightly, and relieved the impact of jumping from a high place, and walked elegantly to the carriage across the street. Charlotte smiled and said, "It is very impolite to break into other people's dreams casually. Can you tell me who you are?" A young girl's voice came from the carriage, and she said in a panic, "What did you say?" "I'm just passing by, please get out of the way." Charlotte whispered, "I didn't block your way. If you don't want to say anything, I won't force you. If you want to know about Mrs. Yang Mills' death, I am willing to answer all your questions." The young girl in the carriage whispered after a long time, "Sorry, it seems that I really recognized the wrong person. Sir, please get in the car." The door of the carriage opened a crack. Charlotte did not hesitate, opened the door, and stepped into the carriage in one step. The carriage needs to be towed by horses, and the wheels are very high, which makes the carriage much higher than the cars of later generations. Ordinary people need to use pedals to get on and off freely. If Charlotte can step on it calmly in one step, she must be a first-class warrior with first-class physical fitness, or an extraordinary person, or both. There was a young girl in the carriage. She was wearing a long skirt and a homely look. She had a delicate appearance and wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses. Her fair face was calm, but her slightly red earlobes and the dagger hidden in her hand gave away her true identity. Charlotte Mecklin, graduated from the University of Sheffield, works in the General Office of the Central Government, first level extraordinary. The brief introduction broke the awkwardness and relieved the girl's uneasiness and put away some of her hostility. She whispered, "And de Breton, third year at Gorgias University, became a dream walker in her first year." Charlotte paid a little attention to the surname of Breton, which was noble and extraordinary, but it was obviously inappropriate to ask anything in this situation. He smiled and said, "Gorgias University is the university I once dreamed of," and de Breton obviously didn't know how to deal with this kind of out-of-character conversation, and said softly, "Sheffield University is also a good university." Charlotte smiled and said, "Every university is a good university. This is an indisputable nonsense. The universities of this era are not the ocean of knowledge of the simple education of later generations, but a place of blessing from the gods. There are 9 gods who rule the era, but only 4 of them have their believers who founded universities. Each university is the highest institution of mankind, and each university cultivates the sons of God." Anne agreed with this sentence, and unknowingly the rhythm of the conversation led Charlotte astray. "I am very sad about what happened, but Mrs. Young-Mills and I are not familiar with each other. Mr. Young-Mills must have misunderstood his wife, which led to the tragedy. If you go to the Central Government office to investigate, you can easily find out that I have been on vacation in Senes recently and just came back a few days ago." And de Breton hesitated and said, "I believe Mr. Mecklin, I misunderstood you." Charlotte smiled slightly. He used a very common rhetoric in later generations, using irrelevant but indisputable facts to prove a result thousands of miles away. Many people believe the indisputable fact, but would subconsciously ignore that it had nothing to do with the result. Chapter 13 Insight. Charlotte had no choice. She didn't want to take responsibility for her ex, so she could only use this method to clear herself. And was silent for a while before whispering, "Sophie, Mrs. Young-Mills is my aunt." Charlotte immediately said solemnly, "I firmly believe that Mrs. Young-Mills is a loyal lady." Anne felt very comforted, and the girl whispered, "I don't believe that Aunt Sophie would do anything dishonorable, so I couldn't help coming here in the middle of the night." Her little face flushed slightly, and she glanced at Charlotte, and suddenly thought to herself, "No wonder Aunt Sophie has rumors about him. Mr. Charlotte is handsome and gentle, graduated from a top university, is a promising government office worker, and is a rare extraordinary person. He is indeed the most suitable love partner in any girl's mind." And Brittany felt that her little face was burning again, and she hurriedly interrupted these messy divergent imaginations, stood up, gently pulled the hems of her skirt on both sides, squatted slightly, performed a very grand etiquette, and said apologetically, "I came here to test Mr. Charlotte and cause this mess. Please forgive me." Charlotte asked thoughtfully, "If I were that kind of dishonorable man, would Miss Anne let me sleep forever?" Anne Brittany's pretty face flushed, and she could no longer suppress her shyness. She lowered her head. She really thought so. As a proud daughter who became a superhuman in her freshman year, Anne Brittany knew that her beloved aunt had died a violent death caused by a playboy. Her first thought was to revenge her aunt. She drove here alone in the middle of the night, just to use the dream technique to pretend that her aunt had returned from hell and scare Charlotte to death in her dream. Charlotte Mecklin was indeed not a clean person before. Even though she was a superhuman, she had a guilty conscience. Although she might not be scared out of her wits by the ghost in the dream, there was a high probability that she would be exposed. If Anne found out the truth in her dream, the situation would definitely be extremely bad. And whispered, "I am willing to make compensation." She really didn't know how to end it. Charlotte smiled and said, "If my relatives were in their shoes, they would be 100 times more impulsive than Miss Anne. The most urgent thing is to clear Mrs. Young-Mill's reputation as soon as possible so that she can rest in peace. If Miss Anne needs it, I am willing to do my best to help. However, it is already late at night, which is very inconvenient. Let me send Miss Anne home first, and we will discuss this matter in a few days." Anne Breton bowed her head slightly and thanked her. Charlotte got out of the carriage, sat in the driver's seat, and gently urged the horse. A clear and beautiful voice came from the carriage. "Number 58, 6th Avenue, Val d'Oise. As a qualified talent from the imperial education system, the school has taught many necessary skills. Driving is one of the 3 magical skills that every gentleman must learn. Swordsmanship, riding and driving." "Wrong, it is driving." Charlotte replied, "I know, Miss Anne." The horseshoes clattered and the wheels rumbled. The speed of the carriage was never too fast, even slower than the electric cars on Earth after the speed limit. It took more than an hour to get from Alexandria to Val d'Oise. If it weren't for the bloody glory, the cold wind in the middle of the night would have been enough to make Charlotte catch a cold. Charlotte sent Anne to number 58 6th Avenue and saw a majestic old house. She was very envious and knew that her guess was right. Anne of Brittany was indeed a noble lady and not from an ordinary family. Anne got off the carriage and was about to walk into the mansion through a hidden secret door. Suddenly, she turned back and said to Charlotte, who had gotten off the driver's seat, "It's so late, and I feel sorry to bother Mr. Charlotte to take me back. There are no public carriages now. Why don't you drive my carriage back and I'll have someone pick it up tomorrow?" Charlotte hesitated slightly. He really didn't want to walk back for more than an hour or two. Walking was much slower than driving a carriage, so he agreed and said, "Thank you, Miss Anne, for your kindness." Anne smiled and waved at Charlotte. She turned and walked into the mansion. There were shadows swaying in the mansion. Obviously, someone had been guarding the door for this lady and waiting for her to return. After Charlotte traveled through time, although her life was not bad, and she even successfully got a promotion and salary increase with her intelligence, she was still far away from this kind of aristocratic life. He sighed and drove the carriage back. After tying the carriage downstairs of the apartment building, Charlotte returned to his new apartment. He lay on the bed and couldn't sleep for a while. He opened his eyes for a while, then closed them for a while. After trying many times, he murmured to himself in surprise and joy, "It's not an illusion." Closing his eyes, Charlotte can sense everything within about 15 steps with himself as the center of the circle. He knows why. There is a small bloody vortex in the center of the eyebrows. Countless tiny pale golden runes form a wonderful structure, hidden in the bloody vortex, floating and floating. It is this wonderful rune that gives him such a strange ability. Charlotte has learned relevance knowledge at the University of Sheffield. This rune is called insight. Although bloody glory belongs to the general category of evil energy, the fighting method is almost the same as fighting spirit, which also increases the body, strength and speed. The disadvantages: equal energy level, medium power, only slightly better speed. The advantage is that bloody glory can give the driver several special abilities, which are called 13 wonders. Insight is one of the 13 wonders of bloody glory. It can make a person's vision form a sphere. The extraordinary person with this ability will never be attacked by surprise. In the scene of a group fight, he can deal with attacks from all directions. Even in a single fight, he has a great advantage. It is a very powerful auxiliary combat skill. Charlotte Mecklen summoned the evil gout on the seashore of Cenis and opened the extraordinary. The first choice was to condense the bloody vortex between the eyebrows. He also imagined that he could see something wonderful by condensing the insight rune. Unfortunately, he didn't come back alive from vacation. After returning from Cenis, Charlotte has no time to practice, but bloody glory has grown at an incredible speed. This matter is very strange and puzzling. Opening insight consumes a lot of spiritual energy. Charlotte tossed for most of the night and was a little tired, so she fell asleep soon. Not long after, it was dawn. Charlotte got up early in the morning, thinking about his plan to make a fortune. Although he did not rest well at night, he was not very sleepy because of his extraordinary energy. He wrote a letter, stating his request for leave, paid a centime, and asked the apartment's errand boy to deliver the letter to Kilmainham prison. Charlotte packed up a little, wrapped a multi-headed flail in a piece of cotton cloth, and prepared to sell it. As soon as he went out, he saw a noble girl jumping lightly from a decorated carriage, and smiled at him and said, "Hello again, Mr. Charlotte." Chapter 14 Magical Item Auction. Charlotte was slightly surprised and said, "Miss Anne, why are you here so early? I just need to do some personal business." "Your carriage is over there, thank you for lending it to me," and nodded to another coachman in the carriage, and the coachman jumped off the carriage to drive away the carriage that was parked here last night. She said to Charlotte, "Where are you going?" "I'll give you a ride." Charlotte envied the lifestyle of having a carriage as a means of transportation. Riding in a carriage is much more comfortable than walking, especially in rainy weather. Walking is simply a disaster. He can afford a carriage, but parking the carriage requires a yard, the horse pulling the carriage needs a stable, and a coachman needs to be hired. The various expenses attached to the carriage are not affordable for a first-level clerk of the 41st rank, and a first-level clerk of the 37th rank cannot afford it either. This is a lifestyle with class differences. He said, A friend asked me to sell a magic item. Anne's eyes lit up and she said, I just happen to know about a magic item auction. Charlotte was also slightly happy. He didn't have any connections. If he wanted to sell something, he could only find a second-hand shop. Such shops usually didn't offer too high a price. Magic item auctions can often be auctioned at several times the price. This kind of gathering is a gathering of high-end people. The organizers are usually very prestigious. Only wealthy businessmen or nobles will be invited. The Mecklin family is also rich, but it is still not enough to participate in the magic item auction. Charlotte, as the second son of the Mecklin family, has no way to enter. Anne stretched out her hand to invite her. Charlotte didn't hesitate much, opened the door and invited Anne to get on the carriage, and then got on the carriage herself. This carriage is a little more simple than the one yesterday, but it is still very spacious, enough to seat 7 or 8 people. Charlotte sat down opposite Anne and asked, Miss Anne, don't you have classes today? As a junior, she should be very busy with her studies. Charlotte asked casually to open the topic of the day, and replied with a little pride, I have completed the main credits, and only need some internships, so the coursework is quite relaxed and I don't need to go to school every day. Charlotte then realized that she shouldn't look at the world of academic masters from the perspective of a poor student. When Wang Haisheng was in college, he was extremely miserable every day. He had to work hard to complete the homework instructed by the teacher, worried that he would not have enough credits and could not graduate. He could not relax at all. There is a famous motto in the mathematics department, people can do anything when they are pushed to the limit, except mathematics. Charlotte Mecklin is similar to Wang Haisheng. They are just ordinary excellent. He graduated from Lemon College and was admitted to Behemoth National Academy. He once took the Lamia breathing method, but until graduation, he only managed to condense the power seed and could never break the cocoon. During his 4 years of study at the University of Sheffield, he failed to successfully awaken his spirit, and he had to rely on summoning evil gods to enter the extraordinary. Compared to Anne Breton, who had entered the supernatural realm on her own in her freshman year, she was not as good as Anne Breton. Anne Breton was much more calm than yesterday. This lady was actually quite tall. According to the measurement system on Earth, she was about 170 centimeters tall. Even if there was an error in the thickness of the soles of her shoes, it would not be less than 168 centimeters, which was considered a tall girl. She changed into a pair of tortoise-shell-rimmed glasses today. She did not wear a long skirt, but knee-high boots and leather hunting pants, which perfectly outlined her long legs. She wore a close-fitting jacket on her upper body. Her soft blonde hair was tied into a ponytail and hung behind her head. She looked heroic. There was also a triangular hat next to her seat. After the greetings, Charlotte asked, Miss Anne, do you have other activities today? I'd be very sorry if you changed your schedule because of me. Anne hesitated slightly and replied, I'm going to the magic item auction, too. Anne whispered, but there's one thing I have to explain to Mr. Mecklin. I'm not going to the magic item auction to buy things, but the person who killed my aunt is at today's auction. Charlotte was shocked and asked, is Mr. Yang Mills here too? Shouldn't we report it to the patrol army? Anne bit her lip and said, the person who organized the magic item auction is Duchess Misu, and the patrol army cannot enter the venue. Charlotte immediately understood that although the Far's empire was a society ruled by law, it was completely different from the market conditions in later generations. In Wang Haisheng's original world, no high official dared to openly entertain wanted criminals, but the laws of this world were just a pile of waste paper in front of the nobles. Power is above law. The patrol army would not offend the Duke for a wanted criminal, especially a powerful aristocrat like Duchess Misu. Charlotte had heard a lot of rumors about Duchess Metsu, but all of them could be summarized as one thing: she was in charge of 1/6 of the empire's navy. The Northern Fleet was the family-inherited army of Duchess Metsu, and never pledged allegiance to His Majesty the Emperor, but only to the Metsa family. If it weren't for Zimmerman Axelrobin bringing back the Pirate King's fleet, and Duchess Metsu losing part of her fleet while exploring the raging sea a few years ago, the size of the Northern Fleet at its peak would have been half of the size of the Imperial Navy. Charlotte was just thinking about whether her little gadget would be unsightly at such a high-end auction, but she heard the girl's somewhat apologetic voice, saying, I'm sorry to involve Mr. Mecklin in this, but I really need your help. Charlotte asked with some doubt, how can I help? He didn't think it was a good idea to make a move at Duchess Metsu's auction. Even if the Breton family was powerful, they would never do such a thing. And whispered, he knows me. But he doesn't know you. You can help me get close to him and put this tracking beetle on him. In this way, even if he leaves the auction, I can track him." And Brittany opened her palm, and a small black beetle lay on her beautiful palm. This black beetle was lifelike, but it was not a living creature, but a magical alchemical creation. You could even see the gears as thin as hair. Charlotte didn't understand how magical alchemical creations worked. Although the technology on Earth could do this, the principles were clear and everything was scientific. Magical alchemical creations were chaotic everywhere. And there was no complete theory to date. She could only admire that this world was indeed magical. This matter was quite a piece of cake and would not cause any trouble. Charlotte agreed immediately and smiled. "I am willing to serve Miss Anne." The two discussed some details of the action, and the carriage arrived in front of an old house. Charlotte didn't expect that the venue of this magic item auction would be in the Alexandria district. He had always thought that the auction of magic items should be held in the Val d'Oise district, and he didn't expect it to be held in the Alexandria district, not even too far from the Savings Association apartment. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Merchant Louis. The Alexandria District, which is a commercial district, is equivalent to the CBD, Central Business District, on Earth. It is the core area of a city. However, in the Fars Empire, the Val d'Oise district is the cultural and administrative center. The two got off the carriage, and Anne handed over an invitation. The old butler at the door politely welcomed the two to enter. Charlotte had no doubt that if Anne didn't bring it, he would definitely not be able to enter. This old house covers an area of about 5 acres. After entering, you can see all kinds of guests coming and going, which is very lively. Charlotte asked with a little curiosity, "How can I sell my magic items at the magic item auction?" Before Anne could answer, there was a hearty voice saying, "I wonder if this gentleman has any magic items to sell." Charlotte looked up slightly and saw a well-dressed elderly gentleman smiling at her. He also smiled politely and said, "It's a multi-headed flail." He opened the package in his hand and revealed the handle of the multi-headed flail. The elderly gentleman said, "May I take a closer look?" Charlotte handed over the package in her hand. The elderly gentleman took the package steadily, looked at it for a while, and said with a smile, "Let me introduce myself. I run a magic item store called Louis's Store. My name is Louis Simi." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "Mr. Simi, I hope to have the opportunity to patronize your store often." Louis Simi handed over a card with his name, the name of the store, and the address on it. Charlotte took the business card with great interest. When he traveled through time, business cards had been eliminated. Everyone only exchanged phone numbers and WeChat. Louis Smith said, "I don't want to buy this multi-headed flail, but I can recommend a good buyer for you." Charlotte was very happy and said, "Thank you, Mr. Smith." Louis Smith smiled and said, "You can call me Louis." "I haven't asked your name yet," Charlotte replied. "Charlotte Mecklin. You can call me Charlotte, my friends all call me that." He sent a consulting look to Anne, and Anne followed them calmly. Charlotte wanted to take care of her own small business first, and then accompany Anne to deal with Yang Mills, but since Anne was willing to accompany him, he had no reason to refuse. Louis complimented Anne's beauty without leaving any trace, and Anne politely accepted it. The attitudes of both of them revealed the foulness and sophistication of the upper class. Charlotte also knew this skill, but she didn't want to participate in this kind of hypocritical social interaction, and silently followed Louis Smith to a room. Louis said loudly, "Mr. Lucas, I have collected a multi-headed flail for you that you are looking for." A strong man who was talking to a friend looked over. The guy was wearing a military uniform and his rank was quite high. Charlotte was not very good at reading these badges, so she could only make a rough judgment based on the complexity. When Lucas saw Louis Simi take out a multi-headed flail, his eyes lit up immediately. He strode over, gently picked it up, shook it, and said, "The enchantment has completely collapsed. Can you repair it?" Louis Simi smiled and said, "Master Leo is here, and there is no problem in repairing the enchantment." Lucas nodded and said, "I want the things. How much is it?" Louis said, "We are old friends. I will only charge you 140 iku. Lucas nodded and said, "Repair the enchantment and send it to my house. Louis agreed with a smile, and Lucas said nothing else and went back to chatting with his friends. Louis took Charlotte to a corner where no one was around and whispered, "This multi-headed flail needs to be re-enchanted. The cost of repair is about 50 francs. I am willing to pay 75 francs to buy it. What do you think?" Charlotte smiled and said, "No problem." This price was higher than he expected. Louis took out his wallet, counted out 15 50-franc notes and handed them to Charlotte, saying, "Happy cooperation." To be honest, Charlotte had never touched such a large denomination of banknotes before, let alone 50 francs. He had never touched even 20 francs, and the largest denomination of banknotes he had touched was 10 francs. Charlotte took the banknote, verified its authenticity with a method she learned in school, put the banknote into her wallet, and said with a smile, "Louis, I'm lucky to meet you, otherwise I don't know what to do. This is my first time doing business." Louis laughed and said, "Please take care of my shop in the future." The two chatted for a while, and Louis Simi said, "With Miss Anne accompanying me, it would be very tactless for me to stay by your side. I won't bother you anymore. Next time I will come to explain some little secrets of the business world and auctions to you." He handed the package in his hand to the servant who had been following him, and left with a smile. And whispered, "Louis is a very powerful businessman. You must be careful when trading with him." Charlotte nodded. He really didn't think there would be many opportunities to do business with Mr. Louis Simi. Where did he get the magic items? The other party was running a high-end business. Charlotte put the wallet into his inner pocket without leaving any trace, and pressed it. The thick banknotes in the wallet made him feel very safe. Even in his previous life, he had never taken such a large sum of money. 75 écus is roughly equivalent to 2 to 2.2 million RMB. Even in his previous life, it was enough for him to buy a house, or at least for a down payment. Charlotte and Anne walked around the old house for a few times, and roughly understood what the auction of this era was like. Before the auction officially started, guests would be allowed to trade privately. Only those who could not complete the transaction or were not satisfied with the price would formally submit the magic items in their hands to the auction. The Fars Empire did not have a formal auction organization, and the business was not very developed, so this kind of auction relied heavily on the prestige of the organizer. Charlotte and Anne walked around for a while, and Anne whispered, "I saw him. Let's not communicate for the time being, pretend not to know him." Charlotte smiled slightly, and under Anne's guidance, he also saw Mr. Yang Mills, who had a lot of entanglements with him. Yang Mills was a tall and sinister man, about 40 or 50 years old, with good taste in clothes. Every piece of clothing was very exquisite and matched in style. He held a cane in one hand, which was inlaid with gold wire and a gem, which looked extremely expensive and was completely different from military goods. He clenched his fist in the other hand, reflecting a small part of his agitated emotions. Charlotte stared at Yang Mills and strode past. Chapter 16, The Girl in Her Sleep, The Young Man Cleaning His Gun. Yang Mills only thought that Charlotte had met an acquaintance, and never thought that this young man who passed by was the enemy he wanted to kill the most, no one else. When Charlotte passed by Yang Mills, she secretly put the magic beetle that Anne gave him into his pocket. A few minutes later, the two met again. Anne's pretty face was slightly flushed, and she whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Charlotte." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "It's just a small effort. I also want to do something for Mrs. Yang Mills' reputation." This sentence is the truth from the heart, because the reputation of this lady is closely related to Charlotte's reputation. If her reputation is flawless, his reputation will be as solid as a rock. If Mrs. Yang Mills' reputation is ruined, Charlotte's reputation will also collapse like a mountain. There is no one in the world like Charlotte, who hopes that this lady's reputation is pure and flawless. Yang Mills did not walk around. He waited quietly in a guest room until the auction started and then walked into the venue. Anne and Charlotte hid in the corner of the venue. They pretended not to know each other, but they stared at Yang Mills, wanting to know what he was doing. Soon, the famous Duchess of Misu appeared proudly. She was not old, only in her 30s, and she was very well maintained and beautiful. Except for her tall figure, she was even taller than ordinary men. She was almost the ideal woman in men's minds. After the opening remarks of the Duchess of Misu, the first auction item soon came on the auction table. It was a magic sword, and the starting price was 180 écus, far exceeding Charlotte's entire fortune. This magic sword was very popular. After several rounds of bidding, it exceeded 300 écus, and was finally bought by a wealthy customer for 370 EQ. The starting price of the second item was also higher than Charlotte's entire fortune. He no longer had any interest in paying attention to the auction. He went to the long table that provided food and drinks on the side of the hall and took a few small cakes to fill his stomach. He got up in the morning and had not eaten yet, so he was a little hungry. There is no custom of breakfast in the Fars Empire. It is a standard two-meal system, only lunch and dinner. A few nobles have the habit of afternoon tea and midnight snacks, but Charlotte is not used to this. He often buys himself breakfast, even though the only leftover bagels he can buy in the morning are leftover bagels from the previous night. After filling his stomach, Charlotte took another glass of wine, drank it all, and returned to the corner with satisfaction. This is the seventh auction item. This auction item is an ancient painting that is said to depict the true appearance of the overseas evil god. When Duchess Miso introduced it, she mentioned intentionally or unintentionally that at least 12 strange murders and more than 220 lives were related to this magic item. This did not affect the crazy pursuit of this ancient painting, and it was still sold at a very high price. What surprised Charlotte and Anne was that Yang Mills actually joined the bidding and won the auction item at the price of 507 acres in the fourth round. Yang Mills took the ancient painting and left in a hurry. Obviously, his goal was very clear. Anne gave Charlotte a signal, and the two left the magic item auction one after the other. This magic item auction opened Charlotte's eyes and increased her knowledge. Although he had to leave early, he didn't feel sorry. After all, there was nothing here that a prison clerk could afford. Charlotte left the auction, and Anne, who had left earlier, was waiting for him in the carriage. Charlotte got on the carriage, and Anne asked the driver to set off immediately. Anne had no time to greet Charlotte. She closed her eyes, muttered something, and occasionally raised her voice to indicate the direction to the driver. Charlotte was not familiar with the extraordinary power of the dream system. With nothing to do, he began to think about whether he should go to see the house if he had time in the afternoon. Charlotte occasionally lifted the curtain of the carriage and felt that the road was familiar. As the carriage sped, the road became more and more familiar to him. He couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, "This is the way to Mrs. Young Mills's house." He didn't dare to mention it to Anne, because this kind of familiarity was not serious. As the carriage stopped in front of a very imposing house, many familiar memories came to Charlotte's mind. Among them, how to do some passionate activities with a young lady in this imposing house, which are not allowed to be publicly described on the internet in later generations. Even if it is written in a novel, it is not allowed. Charlotte is a little ashamed. Although these youthful and frivolous history can be pushed to the predecessor, he must bear the cause and effect. He can only walk on thin ice and be careful to overcome all difficulties. And whispered, "I want to take a nap. Please Mr. Charlotte guard me for half an hour." When she said this, her pretty face flushed. Girls of any era, in front of a strange man, say that they want to take a nap and need the other party to guard them, which implies some kind of feelings. Although both of them know that this is a must for the dream technique and has nothing to do with love, there is still a hint of charming atmosphere quietly born. Charlotte smiled faintly and said, "Miss Anne, don't worry." Anne thanked him, clenched her fists, closed her eyes, her long eyelashes fluttered slightly, and fell into deep sleep. Charlotte had nothing to do, so she pulled out the newly purchased Magnum handgun and wiped it carefully with a cloth. The rapier was not convenient to carry and too annoying, so Charlotte didn't wear it. Besides, a pistol was much more useful as a self-defense weapon than a rapier. Although the second-hand pistol was well maintained, the gun body was quite dirty. Charlotte was a person with a slight obsession with cleanliness and had long wanted to wipe it carefully. Charlotte wiped the pistol clean until it was as bright as new, and checked the bullets again. Except for the extra 2, he filled the magazine with 18 bullets. As long as the safety was turned on, this 80% new pistol was ready to fire at any time. The carriage parked quietly on the street, the girl sleeping, and the young man cleaning the gun. This is a very touching picture. Charlotte put the pistol, which had been cleaned like new, into the gun bag inside his coat. Suddenly, a warning signal came to his mind. He quickly opened his eyes of insight, and a sphere with a radius of 15 steps and centered on himself immediately popped out. He was horrified to see the rolling black air coming out of the Young Mills's mansion. Anne, who had fallen into deep sleep, showed a look of pain and kept groaning, but she couldn't wake up. Charlotte didn't hesitate, and immediately jumped out of the carriage and headed straight for the Young Mills mansion. As soon as he entered the mansion, He felt as if he had entered another world. Chapter 17, The Corridor of the Evil God. A long corridor with countless closed doors on both sides, and an evil atmosphere that does not belong to this world filled the air. Charlotte pulled out his pistol, and even more focused on his bloody glory, opened his eyes of insight, and rushed into the depths of the house. This mansion was extremely deep. Charlotte ran for more than 10 minutes, but still could not see the end. There was only a long corridor and countless closed doors. He did not explore the rooms on both sides of the corridor at all. The eyes of insight could see that the doors were full of darkness, which did not belong to the human world at all. A strange buzzing sound came from far away. As soon as Charlotte raised his pistol, he saw a black beetle flying over and lingering around him. Charlotte hesitated slightly and took a step forward. The black beetle immediately flew a few meters away, as if leading the way. He followed the black beetle without hesitation. The black beetle coiled left and right, and the corridor in front of him changed. Countless corridors appeared, and there were countless forks. Charlotte felt a little regretful, but there was no way out now. He was 100% sure that Anne was trapped in a dream. As for whether it was worth it to break in and save a strange girl, it was too late to say that now. Led by the black beetle, Charlotte ran for half an hour. He knew that this was not normal. Although the house was magnificent, it was not so large. Charlotte became more and more anxious. Suddenly, he heard a scream. The black beetle also accelerated its wings and led him to turn several corridors. Charlotte rushed forward a few steps and saw a young maid with only the upper body left. She was lying on the ground covered in blood and there was a mess under her belly. When she saw him passing by, hope flashed in the maid's eyes and she trembled and shouted, "Save me, save me." Charlotte felt upset. Even if he became a master-level extraordinary person, he could not bring the dead back to life. That was the realm of gods. This young maid only had the upper body left. He had no ability to save her. Charlotte couldn't send the maid off, he wasn't that cruel. All he could do was just cover his face and pass by. The maid's screams became more and more shrill, and Charlotte was in a very bad mood. He was sure of one thing, that Yang Mills was holding some evil ritual, and this house had become inhuman, and he was afraid that there were not many living people in it at this moment. I wonder how Miss Anne de Brittany is doing, whether she has met with an accident. Charlotte never expected that he would encounter such a high-level battle just to help a little. He continued to move forward with the black beetle. A strange girl in hunting clothes ran over. She was surprised and happy to see Charlotte and shouted, "Mr. Mecklin, save me." Charlotte was slightly surprised. She raised her 80% new Magnum hand shuttle and asked, "How do you know me?" The girl in hunting clothes blushed and said, "I am Anne Breton." Before Charlotte could say anything, she saw a monster over 3 meters tall, with a red body, as if without skin, holding a huge hammer and slowly chasing after him. In such a dangerous scene, Charlotte calmed down, closed her eyes, then raised the Magnum hand shuttle and fired 3 shots at the girl in hunting clothes. The smoke was curling, and the figure of the girl in hunting clothes gradually blurred, turning into a tall and sinister man. He shouted in disbelief, "How could you shoot at me?" Charlotte's answer was to quickly shoot 2 more times. At the same time, he was very glad that the first superpower he awakened was in sight. Charlotte didn't understand why Yang Mills didn't pretend to be the real Anne of Brittany, but instead transformed into a strange girl, but this didn't affect the result. He became alert and used the Eye of Insight once, discovering the true identity of the hunting girl, and killed the guy who tried to awaken the evil god with 5 bullets. Yang Mills fell to the ground, and blood gushed out of the 5 bullet holes on his body. More than 3 meters tall, his whole body was red, and he was holding a huge hammer. It was like a monster without skin that did not disappear, but was still approaching step by step. Charlotte took a deep breath, reached out and grasped the blood-sucking hand axe hidden at her waist, and the bloody glory flowed into the blood-sucking hand axe, and the axe blade was slightly bloody. Back in college, Charlotte's major was government civilian work, and he didn't plan to be a combatant. His martial arts skills were quite average, and his close combat skills were particularly poor, and he lacked fighting experience. Charlotte didn't want to choose to fight unless it was necessary. At this time and in this situation, fighting was not the best choice. Charlotte didn't even dare to use the Eye of Insight. If the other party is the overseas evil god, the best outcome of looking directly at the evil god is to become blind. The slightly better outcome is complete madness. The worst outcome is not death, but the curse of the bloodline, and the offspring will be born with bad luck. The predecessor tried it once, and the result was neither good nor bad, and he died directly. There is another possibility. This monster is Enda Brittany. The girl was transformed into such a fierce image by the evil power. Whether it is killing the noble lady of Brittany or being killed by Anne, it is a very serious incident. Why fight? I was just a math teacher in my previous life, not a combatant. Charlotte looked at the monster running over, and she was in a dilemma. The perimeter of Yang Mill's house was surrounded by patrol troops. There were even a few familiar faces to Charlotte. They were officers who had been to the Savings Association apartment to handle cases. Dubin, a young and handsome patrol officer, looked at the rolling black air and asked with a headache, "Who can tell me what happened here?" A patrol soldier said, "This is Yang Mill's house. He just killed his wife a few days ago. Who knows if he is upset and plans to use some evil method to summon the lady's soul back to continue humiliating her." This bad joke did not cause laughter. Instead, it made the patrol soldiers who came here feel very bad. If this joke came true, they would be in big trouble. Summoning souls from the underworld is a super big scene. Dubin sneered at this statement. He looked at Yang Mill's house with rolling black air and did not intend to go in to explore. The young patrol officer whispered, "When will the superiors send the extraordinary people?" The patrol soldier who was joking just now said, "The extraordinary people are more miserable than us." Dubin scolded him, but he had to agree with him. Every time he encountered such a thing, the extraordinary people in the army would not come quickly. They would only appear leisurely when the situation was clear, and take all the credit for themselves. Dubin was proud of his outstanding swordsmanship, but he was not an extraordinary person. When encountering such a thing, his swordsmanship was unreliable. He would only die in vain if he was reckless. He sighed and said, "Wait for the order from the superiors. We just need to guard this place and prevent people from getting close." The rolling black air in Yang Mill's house became thicker and thicker. Chapter 18, Golden Pheasant Tail Flowers and Élysée Countryside Avenue. An extremely luxurious carriage passed by lightly, and the coachman instinctively wanted to avoid trouble. Someone in the carriage uttered a soft exclamation, and a gentle and elegant voice came from the carriage, saying, "Stop." The coachman did not dare to neglect it and hurriedly reined in the horse. A graceful lady got off the carriage. She looked at Yang Mill's house, and her small hands in silk gloves gently pinched, and countless black air rushed into the sky and gathered into a classical oil painting. The lady said lazily, "Send it to number 25 Menon Street." The classical oil painting in the sky disappeared as if it had been taken away. The lady got back on the carriage and gave an order. The coachman shook the reins again and drove the carriage away. The patrol soldiers who saw this scene did not dare to stop the lady, because they all saw the golden pheasant tail flower logo on the carriage. That represented an existence that even their most immediate superiors did not dare to provoke. Endless corridors, more than 3 meters tall, all red, holding a huge hammer, disappeared like a monster without skin. Suddenly returning to the real world, Charlotte was still a little uncomfortable. He didn't even dare to choose the door, and directly broke a window and rushed out of the mansion. Seeing several patrol soldiers from a distance, Charlotte didn't want to have anything to do with the Yang Mill's family anymore, so she hurriedly walked away from another direction. After walking around the street, Charlotte heard the sound of a carriage galloping behind her, and a crisp voice called out, "Mr. Mecklin, please get in the car." Charlotte hesitated for a moment, but still got in the carriage. Seeing the girl safe and sound, he asked out of common sense, "Miss Anne de Breton, are you hurt?" Anne de Breton said with lingering fear, "I'm fine, thanks to you for breaking in and saving my life. Otherwise I would have been trapped in the dimensional corridor created by the ancient painting that depicts the true appearance of the overseas evil god." She stood up and performed a noble etiquette, with gratitude to Charlotte on her pretty face. Charlotte killed Mr. Yang Mills, but did not save the lady, and even he himself almost got trapped in the dimensional corridor. As for how the two of them could get out in the end, he did not see the lady take action, and was still confused. Charlotte knew there was no need to explain, so he smiled and said, "Every gentleman would do the same thing, I just happened to be there." Anne de Breton looked at Charlotte with affectionate eyes. She was a daughter of heaven, usually surrounded by many young talents, but at this moment, she felt that none of these men could compare to Mr. Charlotte Mecklin, who could stand up at the critical moment, full of courage, and was humble and did not take credit afterwards, showing her gentlemanly demeanor. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, but still said, "Miss Anne Breton, if you have nothing to do, I will take my leave. I only have 1 day off, and I was planning to find a house close to my new workplace." Anne Breton showed an interested look and asked, "Did Mr. Charlotte's job change?" Charlotte smiled faintly and said, "From the central government office to Kilmainham prison. The Alexandria district where I live now is far away from there, and I plan to move to Picardy." There was no need to hide these work matters, so Charlotte told the truth. Although the clerk of the central government office sounds more respectable than the prison army, the first-level clerk of the 37th grade is far better than the first-level clerk of the 41st grade. Charlotte did not intend to show off this matter. It was not a cunning act to show off her civil service career to a girl from a top noble family. Anne de Breton's eyes were slightly rippled, and she said with a little joy, "Coincidentally, a relative of mine has a house in Picardy that she wants to sell. I can help you get a good price." Charlotte looked ashamed and said, "I don't have much savings. I can only take out 80 francs. He worked as a first-level clerk in the central government office, with a weekly salary of only 1 franc and 70 centimes. Including extra income, it would not exceed 100 francs a year. In addition, young people have just started working and are generous. If they can save 3 francs a year, they can already live well." Charlotte has worked for 2 years and can still save more than 5 francs. She is already a model of a good young man in the new era and a key focus of the Savings Association. If it weren't for the sale of the multi-headed flail for 75 francs, Charlotte would not dare to think about buying a house of her own. Anne of Brittany's relatives must also be great nobles, and the house they want to sell must be extraordinary. Charlotte doesn't think he can afford it. He just wants to find an ordinary house, not a mansion. Charlotte directly stated the upper limit of the price she could afford, trying to decline the girl's kindness. Anne of Brittany smiled and said, "Mr. Charlotte, please rest assured that the house is within your price range." The girl told the coachman, "Go to the Champs-Élysées." The carriage started moving again. Charlotte thanked the other party with an attitude that it didn't matter if she just took a look. Charlotte has never been to the Champs-Élysées, but he has an impression of this street in his memory. Picardy, like Alexandria, is a commercial district, or a handicraft district according to the custom of the earth. The latter is dominated by large shopping malls and markets, and is famous for its many high-end consumer places. Picardy is relatively civilian, and it sells daily goods. Champs-Élysées is the most prosperous avenue in Picardy, with a strong commercial atmosphere. There are many famous Strasbourg bakeries, pastry shops, coffee shops, various grocery stores, spice shops, tailor shops, and even population markets. It is said that a long time ago, Champs-Élysées was a farmland, which was later expanded into the city. Most farmers received enough compensation and went to the countryside to buy new estates, but there were also very few old residents who stayed where they were. Champs-Élysées was therefore not favored by the nobles, who disliked the purity of its residents. Almost no nobles bought property there, and they would dislike it for losing their status. People who go shopping on Champs-Élysées are either civilians or servants of nobles. The nobles themselves rarely appear there. Because of the strong commercial atmosphere, Champs-Élysées attracted many businessmen to buy real estate, but most of them were commercial properties. The business transactions there were extremely active, but the residential market was very quiet. Charlotte slightly lifted the curtain of the carriage. When he saw the Champs-Élysées, even with a memory of the two worlds, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. This street is 2,600 picometers according to the metric length unit of the empire, which is about 3 kilometers when converted into the length unit of the earth. Because it was originally farmland, it was built very wide. Chapter 19. 58 Élysée and the Cat and Clover Café. The Champs-Élysées has a lane that can accommodate 16 rows of carriages, and there are more than 5 picometers of pedestrian paths on both sides. From any angle, you can see the magnificent Gate of Glory. The Gate of Glory is right in the middle of the Champs-Élysées. It is a miracle bestowed on Strasbourg by the Lord of Glory, one of the 9 gods. It is a square building with 4 arches opening in 4 directions. The Gate of Glory has a very famous miracle. Anyone who enters will randomly walk out of one of the 4 doors, instead of pointing in the direction of advance. It is said that the direction indicates the best fortune of the pedestrian that day. In addition to the Gate of Glory that cannot be ignored, there are many shops on both sides of the Champs-Élysées. A few shops are decorated with high-level alchemy-made, outrageously expensive crystal glass, showing the luxurious goods in the shop to every pedestrian. Apart from this street, there is no other place in the empire that is so noisy and lively. Anne de Breton smiled and said, "Go to number 58, The carriage rumbled along the Champs-Élysées for a short distance and soon turned into an alley. It is not accurate to call it an alley, because it is big enough for two carriages to drive side by side. The alley is not deep. When the carriage reached the end, there was an independent three-story building. In front of it was a small square that could park 5 or 6 carriages. There was an entrance door on the front, a few steps in front of the door, and a pier door on the side for carriages to pass. It looked very impressive. Anne got off the carriage, and Charlotte could only follow. He watched Anne stretch out her hand and press the door of the building to open automatically, and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Charlotte knew that this was a low-level alchemy, called lock-picking. He really didn't expect that a noble lady like Anne de Breton would actually study this kind of magic. Charlotte thought again that the mechanical beetle that tracked Mr. Yang Mills had a new understanding of Miss Anne de Breton. Anne pushed open the door and walked in. She smiled at Charlotte and introduced the house to Charlotte to enter the room later. This house is a recent inheritance from a distant relative of mine. He dislikes the strong business atmosphere here, the noisy environment, and the lack of quietness, so he has always wanted to sell it. You know, the shops on Champs-Élysées have always been in great demand, but houses are always ignored, so his asking price is not high. My relative offered 200 écus, but I know he is in a hurry to use the money recently, so 150 écus is also acceptable. Charlotte thought to herself, my entire net worth is only 80 écus. Is this a price I can afford? Does Miss Anne have some misunderstanding about my financial situation, or is she insensitive to the amount of money? Anne seemed to know what was going on in Charlotte's mind. She raised her beautiful eyebrows and said, he accepts installment payments. You can move in here with a down payment of only 50 écus. I can even convince the other party to give up the interest on the installments. Charlotte followed Anne around the first floor and fell in love with the house. There is a very large banquet hall on the first floor. Perhaps in the eyes of the nobles, this banquet hall is shabby because it can only hold a small dance party with no more than 50 people. But in the eyes of Charlotte, who traveled from Earth, this banquet hall is ridiculously large. It is unobstructed and has an area of 300 to 400 square meters. It is a circle smaller than a standard basketball court, but it is enough to play half a game. This is not all of the first floor. It also has a living room, a dining room and 2 study rooms. On one side of the dining room, there is a staircase that obviously leads to the basement. According to the customs of the Fars Empire, the basement must have a kitchen and storage room. As for the staircase leading upstairs, it is on the side of the banquet hall and is completely separate from the staircase leading to the basement. Charlotte thought to herself, it's impossible to buy such a big house on Earth for only 2 or 3 million, even in the countryside. Besides, it allows installment payment without interest. The seller is simply the biggest philanthropist I have ever met, but where can I get the remaining 70 écus? With my 37th class civil servant, 6 fulls and 15 centimes a week, how long will it take to pay it back? Charlotte spent a few seconds calculating the numbers in her head, and was suddenly shocked. With his civil servant's salary, he could pay off the house debt in less than 3 years. This time is more than 10 times shorter than the mortgage term on Earth that he had just thought of. Charlotte couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Time travelers are indeed the protagonists. Praise the true gods. Also praise Miss Anne. Charlotte suppressed her excitement and said, my weekly salary is probably only 6 francs. Can the other party accept a long payment period of several years? Anne de Brittany chuckled and said, of course there is no problem. Anyone who can pay off the house debt within 10 years can be considered a high-quality buyer, but, Mr. Mecklin is already a civil servant of the 37th grade? You don't look like you graduated for long. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, 2 years after graduation. Anne de Brittany exclaimed. Her eyes were full of waves, her cheeks flushed, and she liked him even more. A young talent who can be promoted to the 37th grade civil servant 2 years after graduation is obviously more charismatic than an ordinary civil servant who is still working as a first-level clerk for years and waiting for the opportunity to be promoted every 3 years. This house is quite old. After weathering the storm, it still looks very solid. In the Fars Empire, hundreds of years old buildings are everywhere. The old houses will not reduce their value, but will become a selling point that people talk about with great relish because of their long history. Charlotte did not go to see the second and third floors. She finalized some details with Anne, took out 1050 foreigner notes from the gains from selling the multi-headed flails, and handed them to the girl. Anne called the coachman in, gave him a warning, and the coachman drove away. Although someone occasionally came to clean this house, it still accumulated a thin layer of dust and was not suitable for staying for a long time. Charlotte was very gentlemanly and invited the other party to have a cup of coffee nearby. Anne also readily agreed. There will never be a lack of tasteful cafes on the Champs-Élysées. Although few nobles patronize it, the empire's writers, painters, sculptors, musicians, and even orators love to patronize the cafes here. Many cafes have even left their famous works and stories. Charlotte took Anne and did not walk far. They found a cafe called Cat and Clover Cafe a few dozen meters away from number 58. Many things in this world are similar to those on Earth, such as cats, but the domestic cats in this world are not as diverse as those on Earth, and they have not been bred into various beautiful colors. Chapter 20, Time Alone for Two People. This Cat and Clover coffee shop has a fat half-grown clever cat, which is very similar to the ocelot on Earth. It is born with a thin spiritual power and a gentle personality. It can guard the house for its owner. It is one of the common pets in the Fast Empire. Charlotte ordered 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, which tasted similar to mocha, and one for Anne, which tasted similar to cappuccino. The taste of coffee in this world is similar to that on Earth, but it is a little more sour. Charlotte doesn't like it very much, so she can only add more sugar to suppress the sourness. Although the two have met twice and almost died together, they don't know much about each other. With such a little leisure time, they chatted about various things while drinking coffee, and their relationship quickly became close. Charlotte made Anne tremble several times with her skillful chatting skills. As a math teacher, she has no problem with logic and eloquence, as well as knowledge and jokes from 2 worlds. Anne talked about some things at school, which also made Charlotte very interested. The first problem Charlotte faced when she crossed over to this world was survival. He began to integrate into this world, accepting his new identity, and the problem of survival gradually ceased to be a problem. He even lived well. A need that went beyond survival was to eat and drink well. From any perspective, being a gigolo was a very generous choice. And Britannia was definitely a suitable marriage partner. Of course, he had to first deal with his fiancée whom he had never met. The good news was that the fiancé was not satisfied with the engagement. The bad news was that because the other party did not like him, Charlotte did not have the other party's contact information, and for a while, she had no way to solve this puzzling problem. Whether from a moral or practical point of view, he had to cancel the engagement before his relationship with Anne de Bretagne made any progress. If the relationship between the two had reached a certain level, and he cancelled the engagement, there would inevitably be a loss of reputation. Charlotte decided to write a letter to her brother tonight, stating that she was willing to give up her inheritance rights, and at the same time entrusted her brother to help contact the fiancé. Anne de Bretagne got a brand new experience from Charlotte. If a man with knowledge systems from 2 different worlds was not fresh enough, even the gods of this world could not do better. She was now somewhat glad that she was reckless that day. If it was not for revenge for her aunt, Anne would never go to the window of a young man in the middle of the night, and would not know Charlotte. The social circles of the two were too far apart, and there was no chance of any intersection at all. Anne de Bretagne thought secretly, could it be that my aunt is in heaven and specially guided me to meet Mr. Mecklen? When she thought of this, her face could not help but turn slightly red again. Charlotte did not know why Anne's pretty face suddenly blushed, but she wisely pretended that she did not see anything. At this time, the carriage of the Breton family appeared outside the window. Charlotte was about to go out to greet them, and Anne whispered, "No need to go out, my mechanical beetle will show the way to the coachman." Sure enough, a few minutes later, the coachman parked the carriage and walked in with a document and a bunch of keys. He placed the document and the key on the coffee table in front of them and stepped aside respectfully. Charlotte flipped open the document. It was a standard document from the Central Government Real Estate Bureau, a house transfer deed, in triplicate, one for Charlotte, one for the original owner, and one to be filed in the archives of the Real Estate Bureau. All 3 documents had the official seal of the Central Real Estate Bureau and the signature of the buyer. Charlotte glanced through them quickly, making sure there were no problems, and signed her name. The coachman took the other 2 and hurried away. Charlotte put away her own title deed and the bunch of keys, and couldn't help but sigh. The life of the nobles was so easy and carefree. All things were done by servants. They didn't have much to do and had a lot of free time. Such a life would be hard to find on Earth, but it was rooted in a very politically incorrect social system. Charlotte glanced at the sky, smiled slightly, and said, "Why don't I treat Miss Anne to dinner?" And the Brittany glanced at the sky, slightly panicked, and whispered, "Sorry, I have to go home for dinner." Charlotte expressed her understanding that many noble families must gather together for dinner, which is a very solemn ceremony. He didn't like it, nor was he used to it, and couldn't accept it, and there was nothing he could do. This is a different world. Charlotte refused to let Anne take him home. He watched the young lady get on the carriage and hurried away. He called the clerk of the coffee shop over and asked, "Can you help me find a few maids to clean the house?" The clerk replied politely, "No problem. Sir, when do you need it?" Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "Now." He wanted to break away from his past life very much. If he could move today, he didn't want to delay it until tomorrow. The clerk of the coffee shop hurried away and soon called over 5 strong middle-aged maids. These 5 women all have a temperament of long-term labor, which makes people feel very friendly. Charlotte hurriedly gave a few instructions and led the maids back to number 58. These maids were very skilled workers and quickly divided the work and started cleaning. Charlotte walked around the first floor and curiously climbed the stairs to the second floor. It was getting dark and the room was already quite dark. He wandered around the second floor for a while and got a general understanding of this floor. There were 15 rooms on the second floor. The largest room was more than 70 square meters, and the smallest room was more than 20 square meters. Although it was not bigger than the Savings Association apartment he lived in before, it seemed more spacious. After walking around the second floor, Charlotte went up to the third floor. The maid in charge of cleaning on this floor bowed to him hurriedly when she saw him. Charlotte waved her hand to show that she didn't care. There were fewer rooms on this floor, only 5 rooms, each of which was nearly 100 square meters. It was a very luxurious suite with terraces on both sides. One side faced the Champs-Élysées. Because the shop in front was only 1 floor, there was no obstruction to the view, and he could almost see the entire street view. The other side brought Charlotte a surprise, especially the street view of the Champs-Élysées. It was only when he stood on the terrace on this side that he realized that the other side of this house was the Lucavero River. And the other side was the Lucavero district, which was already the outer city. The imperial capital of Strasbourg is divided into the upper 7 districts and the outer 15 districts. The upper 7 districts are Val d'Oise, Alexander, Garonne, Rosay, Marvin-Sadeau, Alcatraz and Picardy. Charlotte couldn't remember the names of the outer 15 districts at all. Chapter 21 The Real Kilmainham Jail. Outside the courtyard wall of the new house is the Lucavero River, and the scenery is very beautiful. The Marne district and Lucavero district, where the Kilmainham prison is located, are both in the outer 15th district, outside the old city wall of Strasbourg. Looking down from the terrace, the first thing that comes into view is the yard of Charlotte's new home. The yard is quite large, about 600 to 700 square meters, with a stable and a well, which is very surprising. The maids work very hard. Because it was getting dark, they lit kerosene lamps, carried buckets and rags, and went in and out of the room, busy. Charlotte took a nap on the sofa in a room. When he woke up, he saw a very clean and tidy room. Several maids worked all night to clean the building. Charlotte felt a little guilty, paid double the salary, sent the maids away, and went out to wave a public carriage to the Marne district. He only asked for 1 day off, and he still had to go to work at Kilmainham prison today. Charlotte's immediate superior, the senior sister Mecklenburg, did not ask about his leave yesterday, but only arranged 3 times the workload for him. Charlotte was so busy that he was dizzy. He failed to get off work on time that day, or even failed to get off work at all, and slept in the office at night. When he woke up from the office again, he saw a beautiful woman in military uniform sitting cross-legged on his desk. Charlotte's first reaction was, "Senior Sister Mecklenburg always seems to be in military uniform. I have never seen her wear other styles." Charlotte stood up hurriedly, adjusted her coat, and said, "Warden, what else do you have to do today?" Mecklenburg seemed to be in a strange mood, and said in a low voice, "No need to deal with documents today, you come with me." Charlotte said nothing and followed the senior sister. Mecklenburg led him into the depths of the prison and went all the way down. Charlotte has been working in this prison for a while, but has never left the office area. This is the first time he has entered the depths of the prison. What surprised Charlotte was that this largest prison in the empire actually had very few prisoners, and many cells were empty. He didn't care much about the prisoners, and didn't think much about what this meant. Kilmainham prison is a bunker-style building. There are only 5 buildings within the tall and thick walls: the first office building, the second office building, the prison army barracks, the stables and the main body of the prison. Charlotte also learned that the underground part of this prison is much deeper than the above-ground part. He followed Mecklenburg down to the 17th or 18th floor before reaching the bottom of the prison. The bottom of the prison is not dark. A gate full of sacred atmosphere stands in the center of the basement. Dozens of prison soldiers are armed and ready. When Mecklenburg arrived, the prison soldiers hurriedly saluted. The warden waved his hand and stepped into the gate built underground. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, then followed him in. No one stopped him. After passing through the gate, the bloody glory in Charlotte's body suddenly boiled, and a faint red light emerged from his body. He hurriedly opened the bloody vortex between his eyebrows, restrained the bloody glory, and calmed the turmoil in his body, but he was a little surprised in his heart. The bloody glory would not boil for no reason. On the other side of the gate was still a heavily guarded underground secret room. Of course, it was more like a mine. The prison soldiers guarding the secret room here all had extraordinary auras, and the strong murderous aura made Charlotte very uncomfortable. He even touched the blood-sucking hand axe hidden in his clothes. Mecklenburg took him through several heavily guarded gates and walked out of a black tower. Once again stepping on the ground, Charlotte shouted in surprise. At this moment, he was able to confirm one thing. This is not the Fars Empire. Mecklenburg asked in a low voice, "Do you know what a dimensional plane is?" Charlotte nodded to indicate that she knew and had learned relevant knowledge in college. Mecklenburg said, "This is the real Gilmanum prison, a half-plane abandoned by the gods and once had a brilliant civilization. Every year, the Empire transports a large number of prisoners, erases their memories, forges their identities, and makes them residents here to explore ruins and dig up wealth for the Empire." Charlotte's voice was a little hoarse. He thought of many bad things and asked fearfully, "Senior sister, you brought me here. Is there something for me to do?" Mecklenburg said, "Come with me." About a few minutes later, Charlotte saw a very unexpected person. Zimmermann Axelrobin. Charlotte has read many files on Zimmermann Axelrobin, but she is not familiar with this legendary man of the Empire. Zimmermann was being controlled on a stone bed, and there were countless people wearing black coats and hoods busy around him. Mecklenburg spoke in a low voice with a bitter tone, "In a little while, there will be no Zimmermann Axelrobin in this world. There will only be a Captain Huntington who has lost all his memories and is loyal to the Empire." Charlotte was speechless. Mecklenburg came to see her ex-fiancé off for the last time. He was obviously redundant here, but he couldn't avoid it. Zimmermann was either injected with an anesthetic that could suppress the extraordinary or was cast with a special confinement spell. He behaved very quietly until the alchemy array burst into a strange light, and then he struggled slightly. Of course, it was more like a twitch. The shadow of a heavy and ancient book slowly emerged, and countless floating gray mists rose from Zimmermann and merged into this strange book. Under the traction of a mysterious force, Mecklenburg burst into a bright fighting spirit. The bloody glory in Charlotte's body also boiled again, and it had a subtle secret connection with the shadow of this heavy and simple book. Charlotte couldn't help but exclaimed in a low voice, "The Jade Book." He had never seen it, but he had heard of this book. It was a divine artifact given by the Serpent of Destiny, one of the 9 gods. There is a special course in the university that talks about the origin and function of the Jade Book, as well as the magic alchemy derived from the knowledge in the Jade Book. The Jade Book given to mankind by the Serpent of Destiny, the Golden Book of the Sun given to believers by the Lord of Light, and the Dead Sea Parchment Scroll left by the Old Man with the Lantern are known as the 3 cornerstones of human civilization. Of course, as a time traveler, Charlotte didn't really believe this statement. He had studied the human civilization of this era, and it had little to do with these 3 artifacts, but it couldn't erase the shock in his heart. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Jade Secret Scroll. Mecklenburg whispered, "It is the Jade Secret Scroll imitated by Master Mani. The real Jade Book is in the Court of Destiny." Charlotte was still very shocked. Master Mani's Jade Secret Scroll was also on the university textbooks and was praised as the highest creation of human alchemy. He also noticed that Mecklenburg's expression was very complicated, including hatred, regret, sadness, relief, and many uninterpretable and indescribable emotions. Charlotte tried her best to suppress the bloody glory boiling in her body. Under the influence of the Jade Secret Scroll, it became more and more uncontrollable. She asked curiously, "Can these memories still be read?" When he was in school, he was always curious about this question, but there was no answer in the textbooks, and the professors did not give an answer, only saying that this was knowledge he should not touch. Mendelman said, "They will be crushed by the Jade Secret Scroll and transformed into pure knowledge. The Jade Secret Scroll will not retain the ordinary memories extracted by it." Charlotte understood that having the memory extracted by the Jade Secret Scroll was no different from killing a person. The process of erasing memories was uneventful, and Zimmerman Axel Robin soon became dumbfounded. The shadow of the heavy and simple Emerald Secret Scroll slowly disappeared, and countless gray mists that floated like nothing also disappeared. The fighting spirit on Mendelman's body was then restrained, and the bloody glory in Charlotte's body stopped boiling and converged into the bloody vortex between her eyebrows. The Emerald Secret Scroll, the supreme alchemy treasure, has a strong influence on extraordinary power. Charlotte was not at ease. The alchemists wearing black coats and hoods gave Zimmerman Axel Robin a new personality and a forged identity after a series of operations. His new name is Huntington, a captain of Kilmainham prison, loyal to the royal family and outstanding in martial arts. After the alchemists finished their work, they handed over a document. Mendelman signed his name and handed it to Charlotte, saying, "According to imperial law, this document must be signed by two people." Charlotte then knew why Mendelman brought her here. He did not dare to read the contents of the document carefully. He glanced at it hastily and signed his name. Mendelman did not stay any longer. He took Charlotte through the mysterious gate and returned to the Kilmainham prison in the Marne district. This short journey made Charlotte feel very depressed. Mendelman gave him half a day off and left work early. Charlotte even took the carriage of her direct superior and entered the Val d'Oise district before being released. He returned to the Alexandria district, first terminated the rental contract with a Savings Association apartment, compensated a sum of money, and hired a freight carriage. He asked the apartment's butler to move all personal belongings onto the carriage and left the place where he had lived for 2 years, saying goodbye to Charlotte Mecklen's past. Arriving at number 58, Élysée Country Street, Charlotte discovered that her predecessor had quite a lot of personal belongings, some of which were books. He put all the sundries in the big study and moved all the books to the small study, ready to be placed separately. The previous owner had moved all the valuables away, and there was not a single book in the 2 study rooms. Books in this world are very expensive, leaving only clumsy furniture. The big study room was about 60 to 70 square meters, with bookshelves on all 4 walls, a huge conference table, and matching chairs. The small study room should be called a lounge, with a very old desk and matching chairs, 2 sofas for meeting guests, and a recliner for a short nap, which is more suitable for daily rest. Only 1.5 walls were customized with bookshelves, which were probably not used to place books, but some sundries. Now there are only some empty boxes and some letters. He ignored the other luggage, tidied up the small study room a little, cleaned up the sundries, put the moved books into the bookshelf of the small study room, and inserted the diary of the predecessor into the bookshelf. These previous books will help him understand his new identity. He plans to read them more when he has time. As for the diary, he always feels that it is not right, so he has never dared to read it again. Because most of the original owner's clothes have been discarded, in addition to books, there are only some daily necessities, such as tableware. Charlotte's tableware is very small, and it is made of tin, which is much cheaper. Putting the tableware in the dining room, Charlotte felt hungry. There was no food at home. He did bring some ingredients, but he didn't want to make them himself, because the food made from those ingredients was very unpalatable. Charlotte didn't want to waste the whole afternoon unpacking up, so he was ready to go out for something to eat. He left number 58 and turned into the Élysée Pastoral Street. He soon passed a bakery. He didn't think too much about it and went in and asked, "What bread do you have today?" Most of the bakeries in the Fars Empire are independently run by a certain lady, and everything from baking bread to selling comes from one person. Therefore, the style of each bakery is different, and the taste of the bread sold varies greatly. The female owner of this bakery was a young lady with red hair, about 27 or 28 years old, petite, and smiled and replied, "Our croissants are famous far and wide, would you like some?" Charlotte smiled and said, "Then give me 20. The red-haired female owner quickly made him 20 croissants. Charlotte asked a few more questions and was delighted to find that this shop actually had Dongli country's flower tea, which tasted much better than the black tea of the empire. She also bought some and left the bakery. Although the Élysée Pastoral Street was very prosperous and it was a good time to go shopping, with people coming and going on the street, Charlotte went directly back to number 58 and did not continue to wander around. When he got home, he ate 2 croissants with water and put the rest in the side cabinet of the restaurant, ready to use as food for the next few days. This ancient empire of different time and space did not have such a thing as a refrigerator, so the food could not be kept for a long time. After hesitating for a while, Charlotte decided to go down to the basement to take a look. He had already visited the 3-story building, but had not been to the basement. It was a good time to take a look while the weather was still good. Charlotte lit a kerosene lamp. The architects of the Fars Empire would never leave windows in the basement. This was a characteristic of the empire. Even during the day, the basement would be dark. If it was dark, it would be inconvenient. The stairs in the basement were very long, with 3 corners in total. On the wall of each corner, there was a lampstand for placing kerosene lamps, which meant that the height of the basement might be more than 5 picometers. Charlotte had calculated that the picometer of the empire was slightly longer than the metric meter on Earth. 1 picometer was about 1.15 meters. With this height, the basement was already very spacious. Chapter 23, Protagoras, the great philosopher of humankind. Just as Charlotte expected, the basement of this small building was indeed quite large. The kitchen next to the stairs was large enough to accommodate 7 or 8 cooks. Although there were no windows, there were vents and chimneys, so it was not dark or stuffy. The rest of the area was divided into 4 large storage rooms and 1 small storage room, which were used to store food, wine, firewood and slightly more precious things. One of the storage rooms had a small pile of firewood, and the others were all empty. Charlotte didn't stay for long. After making sure there was nothing to bother her, she went upstairs. Although the new home was still lacking a lot of things, such as clothes, Charlotte decided to take a good rest for a day and not go out. He returned to the small study, took off his coat, put the blood-sucking hand axe hidden in his sleeve on the desk, took off the holster and hung it on the wall with a newly bought imitation antique rapier. Charlotte lay on the sofa and practiced bloody glory for a while. This was what his predecessor did every day. He was restless after crossing over and was too busy at work. He hadn't practiced for a while. Life finally settled down, and Charlotte decided to spend some time every day to practice this extraordinary secret technique. Hundreds of years ago, when the great human philosopher Protagoras was young, his beloved wife was abducted by the vampires and his life or death was unknown. He was heartbroken and vowed to create a secret technique to slaughter all the vampires in the world. This great human philosopher traveled around the world, learned dozens of skills, and went deep into the vampires, fighting with countless vampire masters. Later, he retreated on the highest peak of the old continent, Kyogir Peak, 45 years, and then created the secret method of bloody glory. Bloody glory is divided into 2 parts, Protagoras breathing method and blood feast meditation. Protagoras breathing method can refine 13 vampire secrets and condense 13 bloody whirlpools. Blood feast meditation can breed 13 magic runes, so that practitioners have 13 strange abilities. With this secret method, Protagoras single-handedly slaughtered thousands of vampires, and even exterminated 6 of the 37 clans of the vampires, leaving only 31 clans. At the peak of his fame, he could stop the crying of vampire cubs at night. In his old age, Protagoras donated this secret method to 4 universities for free: Royal Hogwitch University, Hattingen Thunder and Storm University, Sheffield University, and Gorgias University. It was because of the selflessness of this great human philosopher that Charlotte, as a student of Sheffield University, had the opportunity to practice this secret method. The strange breathing method created by Protagoras made Charlotte's restless blood respond to her breathing, giving rise to a surge like the tide. After Charlotte traveled through time, it was the first time she immersed herself in cultivation. Protagoras once wrote a sentence in his handwritten scroll, saying that there are 37 clans in the blood race, and bloody glory can theoretically condense 37 bloody vortexes. It's a pity that I haven't exhausted the mystery of this method. I hope that future scholars can complete this method. In theory, if you condense a bloody vortex, you can try to use meditation to breed runes, thereby obtaining a unique skill. In fact, Most people who practice bloody glory condense 7 or 8 bloody vortexes before they start practicing the blood feast meditation method. Many people have never been able to successfully meditate on any rune in their entire lives. Only a very few people can cultivate 1 or 2 unique skill runes and gain supernatural powers. Charlotte only condensed a bloody vortex between her eyebrows, and was able to obtain the insight rune, which was quite inexplicable. It was purely because of good luck. The power of insight dissipated slightly with the condensation of bloody glory. Although Charlotte closed her eyes, she could sense everything in the small study from a distance. The fluctuations of bloody glory swept over the blood-sucking hand axe on the desk. This exclusive weapon of the vampires had a subtle response to the bloody glory in his body. Charlotte let it flow, and encouraged the bloody glory in her body to extend over. The blood-sucking hand axe trembled slightly, and suddenly felt an infinite hunger, madly swallowing Charlotte's bloody glory. Charlotte did not open her eyes, allowing it to suck her blood energy, and wanted to know what kind of strange changes this blood-sucking weapon would have after being infused with bloody glory. More than 10 minutes later, the blood-sucking hand axe that had absorbed enough blood suddenly sent back a strange blood energy. While Charlotte was rejoicing, the diary hidden on the bookshelf seemed to be attracted by the breath, jumped out, floated in the air, and turned the pages. A majestic voice came from a distant unknown place, and it resounded directly in his mind. "Why are you still alive, mortal? You actually deceived me." Charlotte was horrified, her hands and feet were cold, and she had no idea what had happened. After returning from Senes, he had never read the original owner's diary, always worried about getting involved with the evil god again. Now he finally doesn't have to worry anymore. The evil god is not far away. Facing a desperate situation, Charlotte was unwilling to surrender. Just as he was about to grab the blood-sucking hand axe and fight to the end, a large amount of rolling black gas suddenly emerged from his body, breathing out an evil breath that did not belong to this world. An endless corridor appeared in front of him, and a monster over 3 meters tall, with a red body, as if without skin, slowly walked out of the void with a huge hammer in his hand. A majestic voice resounded through the heavens and earth, mixed with endless anger. "Mortal, you still want to collude with Agmaris to fight against me? He is just an overseas evil god." The evil aura emanating from the diary rolled towards the monster in the endless corridors, and the majestic voice announced the start of the battle. "Agmaris, you only have a tiny wisp of insignificant regret left, and you still want to stop me?" More than 3 meters tall, holding a huge nail hammer, the whole body is red, as if the monster has no skin, suddenly roared to the sky, like a prehistoric beast roaring. The endless corridors are stacked, bursting out with a vast evil energy beyond the imagination of mortals, trying to stop the other evil god from trying to come with the help of the diary. The two powerful forces used Charlotte's consciousness as a battlefield, like thunder and lightning, and hit each other fiercely. Charlotte couldn't help but scream. His brain seemed to be ruthlessly driven into a wedge. The pain was so severe that it could not be over. In just a moment, it was beyond the limit of the ability to bear. The consciousness was torn to pieces by two powerful evil energies, and it felt like the world no longer existed. The originally ordinary diary, countless pages flew around, and the cover kept bulging. Sometimes a castle appeared, sometimes an endless corridor, sometimes a majestic middle-aged man sitting on a luxurious chair, sometimes a monster with a red body and no skin. A bloody hand stretched out from the diary, and then a huge hammer stirred it up. I don't know how long it has been. In the messy room, only Charlotte Mecklen was lying on the ground, almost no longer breathing. Next to him was a diary with a black cover, and a line of bloody scribbled on the ground. "I will return and take the souls owed to me according to the contract." Chapter 24, The Labyrinth of Agmaris by Charlotte Mecklen. A fragment of consciousness suddenly gave birth to thought, "Who am I?" Then countless fragments of consciousness were attracted and gathered together, and the second thought was born, "I am Charlotte Mecklen." The third thought came to mind, "No, I am Wang Heishin." When these three thoughts appeared one after another, more and more fragments of consciousness gathered together, and the memories of two people were intertwined and mixed. But soon a main consciousness suppressed all kinds of evil thoughts. "I am Wang Heishin, who traveled to this world and replaced someone to become Sherlock Mecklen." The memories of the two people were instantly separated, and the consciousness representing Wang Heishin swallowed up the other memory without hesitation. Charlotte opened her eyes slightly, only to feel a splitting headache, and her whole body was extremely uncomfortable, as if she had just endured a cruel punishment. At this moment, his brain was extremely clear. Whether it was Wang Haisheng's memory or Charlotte Mecklen's memory, everything was displayed in detail. Even the smallest things were remembered, even Wang Haisheng's proficiency in Chinese and English, and Charlotte Mecklen's proficiency in the 7 languages of the Old World. Every word was clear as if he had just memorized it. He remembered that because of practicing bloody glory, the evil god that Charlotte Mecklen had summoned had descended. This was not the worst. The arrival of this evil god made the remnant of the overseas evil god Agniras, who had accidentally been contaminated not long ago, materialize. The energy of the battle between the two evil gods blasted his consciousness into pieces. Charlotte didn't know how he could gather his consciousness again and recover, but he had no time to think about this. His body was really in such a bad state. Charlotte stretched out his hand to press the ground, struggled to stand up, tremblingly poured a glass of water, forced himself to drink it, and became much more sober. Too scary. Is the evil god on this world so scary? It's been so long, and that diary can still attract the evil god. I just touched the ancient painting a little, and I was contaminated by its remnant consciousness. If ordinary people encounter evil gods, won't they have no chance of survival? If they hadn't started a war, I would have died. Charlotte, who couldn't control his body completely, sat down on the sofa and suddenly felt something was wrong. A few minutes later, he shouted in horror, "What's going on?" The insight rune between his eyebrows was countless times more complex than before, faintly forming the shape of an eye, and the scope of insight also expanded from a sphere with a radius of 15 steps to more than 100 steps. The entire number 58 Élysée Pastoral Street was covered by the supernatural power, from a bird's-eye view to a bird's-eye view, from east to west, from south to north. The perspective could be adjusted at will. About half an hour later, Charlotte accepted a concept that was well known to the natives of the Old World. Summoning evil gods, dangers and opportunities coexist. Looking directly at the evil gods will bring a rapid improvement in spirituality. If you raise your spirituality through uncontrolled and informal means, you will go crazy, die, and be annihilated. But if you resist, the spirituality you raise is a gift from the evil god. This is extremely dangerous, but also a very ironic reward. Looking directly at the two evil gods without dying, Charlotte's spirituality has been raised incomparably, and his insight ability has increased by more than 10 times. Generally speaking, it takes decades of practicing bloody glory and having extremely profound cultivation in the blood feast meditation method to raise the insight rune to the point where it is as sharp as an eye. After a long while, Charlotte's headache was reduced to a tolerable level, and he also remembered that it was not the first time he had looked directly at the evil god. This explained why bloody glory was rising every day since returning from Senes. Looking at the diary on the ground, Charlotte's heart suddenly lifted. This time, he did not retreat, because the evil god had come anyway. Since he was here, it didn't matter. Charlotte grabbed the notebook, and with a touch of her finger, a line of words appeared on the dark cover: The Labyrinth of Agniras, author, Charlotte Mecklen. He was deeply surprised, wondering how the diary could become the Labyrinth of Agniras and how he could become the author. He turned to the first page, and the original diary was gone. There was no more words on the full page, but a maze was drawn. When his finger touched this page, a sense of consciousness emerged. Charlotte Mecklen summoned the original ancestor of the blood clan, Karnstein, to defeat the evil thoughts of the labyrinth evil god from the Aglar Sea, and put it into the diary, which turned into a book, The Labyrinth of Agniras, with a total of 15 pages and 15 mazes. If the author cannot master the 15 mazes skillfully within the specified time and draw the 16th maze to prove himself, he will lose his identity as the author and his soul will be devoured by the Labyrinth of Agniras. Countdown. 256 days, 21 hours, and another 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Damn it, isn't this matter over yet? How to master these 15 mazes? He pondered for a long time, but still had no clue. He threw the diary on the desk, deeply desperate. Seeing the handwriting on the ground, it looked like it was written in blood. He couldn't help but stretch out his foot to wipe it, but he couldn't wipe it off. The bloody handwriting was like a brand on the floor. Charlotte decided to change the carpet tomorrow to cover up the handwriting, otherwise if a guest came, it would be difficult to explain its origin. Should he tell people this was left by a certain evil god? Charlotte suddenly felt a little hungry. He knew that this was because his spirituality had suddenly increased and his body had consumed too much energy, so he needed to replenish energy. He went to the restaurant to get a croissant to eat, but he still felt hungry, so he took another one. Unknowingly, He ate all the croissants he bought today. After Charlotte ate the last croissant and drank some water, he felt a little better and found that the water tank in the room was empty. He thought to himself, I should take some time to go back to the university and ask the professors at the university how to master the Agneris labyrinth. The professors in the university are protected by the goddess, so they will not be afraid of these evil gods. The University of Sheffield worships Lady Black Moon. The main reason why Charlotte Mecklen chose this university was that it is now the Black Moon era. This is the time when the goddess power is the strongest. Charlotte went out to the yard, drew some water from the well, washed her face with cold water, then filled the water tank, went back to the room and put down the water tank, and then began to sort out her clear memories. He still couldn't remember the time before Wang Haisheng's death, but he recalled how Charlotte Mecklen was courting death and summoning evil gods. The blood feast meditation technique created by Protagoras is to meditate on the 37 original ancestors of the blood clan, and cut these original ancestors one by one to make a feast and eat them. The complexity of the meditation steps and the bloody scenes can be called the most brutal among the many secret methods of the human race. There were at least 9 original ancestors of the blood clan who were promoted to evil gods in ancient times, so the blood banquet visualization method generally requires avoiding these 9 original ancestors of the blood clan. If one must force meditation, it would be tantamount to summoning the evil god. Chapter 25, The Vampire Scroll by Charlotte Mecklen. Charlotte picked up the diary casually and was about to ponder Agneris labyrinth for a while, when suddenly she had an idea and turned the diary over. The cover on this side was as red as blood. With a touch of her finger, a line of handwriting appeared on the blood-red cover, Vampire Scroll author, Charlotte Mecklen. When she opened the cover, a sense of consciousness surged. Charlotte Mecklen summoned Agneris, the god of the overseas labyrinth, and repelled a wisp of evil thoughts from the blood clan evil god Karnstein, and put it into her own diary, which turned into Vampire Scroll, a total of 17 pages, recording the secrets of the blood clan of Adonis. If the author cannot master the Adonis scroll skillfully within the limited time, he will lose his identity as the author and his soul will be taken away by the blood clan evil god Karnstein, who has returned. Countdown. 6 days, 20 hours, and another 23 minutes and 57 seconds. Why is it so urgent? The Labyrinth of Agneris has a buffer of nearly 8.5 months, but the Vampire Scroll has only less than 7 days, which made Charlotte feel a strong sense of crisis. He chose bloody glory in college, and also came into contact with some knowledge about the blood race. There are 33 countries in the Old World, and the 5 most powerful ones are the Ingrima Empire, the Fars Empire, the Braun Empire, the Black Phoenix Dynasty and the Lionheart Dynasty, known as the 5 Great Empires. The Braun Empire was established by 31 clans of the blood race, and it is an out-and-out vampire empire. The establishment of the Braun Empire has a lot to do with Protagoras, the great philosopher of the human race who created bloody glory. This great human philosopher single-handedly slaughtered thousands of vampires, and even exterminated 6 of the 37 clans of the vampires, leaving only 31 clans. He even had the wronged soul of the Grand Duke of the Vampires in his hands. When he was at the peak of his fame, he could stop the crying of vampire cubs at night, forcing the vampires to hold an alliance. This alliance accomplished 2 major events for the vampires. The first thing was that the patriarchs and elders of each clan came forward to form a huge secret scroll compilation committee, compiling all the secrets of the 37 clans. The second thing was to plan the issue of establishing a country, and decades later, Baron was established, withstanding nearly 100 wars of the human national coalition forces in the old continent, laying the foundation for the new empire. The Vampire Scroll, also known as the 28th volume of the Vampire Scroll, is also known as the Adonis Scroll. It is one of the 6 vampire royal families, the direct secret of the Adonis clan. Karnstein, the evil god of the vampires, is the original ancestor of the Adonis clan. The compilation of the Vampire Scroll began decades after the great human philosopher Protagoras created bloody glory. At that time, the great philosopher was already in his twilight years. He tried several times to snatch the scroll that was being compiled, but gave up for various reasons. Until his death, the great human philosopher had never seen the Vampire Scroll. He only left one sentence: "It's a pity that I haven't exhausted the mystery of bloody glory." I hope that future scholars can complete this method. Students from the 4 universities have discussed whether Protagoras would become a god if he obtained the Vampire Scroll and completed bloody glory. Of course, there is no answer to this question. After the successful compilation of the Vampire Scroll, only the high-level Blood Clan and the most outstanding young genius of the Blood Clan are qualified to read it. There is no record of human beings reading it. Charlotte sighed and thought to herself, I really should take some time to go back to the university and ask the professors for some advice, take a day off tomorrow. He moved to a new home, which was many times better than his previous living environment, but it also had some inconveniences, such as he could not just ask a servant from the Savings Association apartment to deliver a letter for him. It was already late at night, and it was pitch black outside, with only the faint light from the kerosene lamp in the small study. Charlotte opened the first page of the Vampire Scroll, read it carefully, and breathed a sigh of relief. He could not understand the labyrinth of Agneres at all, but after all, he had been exposed to some knowledge of vampires in college, and had the foundation of bloody glory, so he had no obstacles in reading the Vampire Scroll. The foundation of the secret method of the Adonis Blood Clan is called Blood Flame Key. This secret method is recorded on the first page of the Vampire Scroll. Blood Flame Key is also one of the 13 magic skills of bloody glory. The Blood Flame Key created by Protagoras is very different from the secret method of the Adonis Blood Clan. It is more domineering and radical, but lacks the maturity and ruthlessness of thousands of tempers. While reading, Charlotte tried to gather the bloody glory in his chest according to the instructions on the secret scroll. To practice the foundation of blood flame energy, he had to open the bloody vortex in his heart. He thought this step was very difficult, but he didn't expect it to be very easy. In just half an hour, he condensed the second bloody vortex in his chest. The formation of the second bloody vortex represented that Charlotte Mecklen had stepped into the second level extraordinary. According to the normal progress of cultivation, even if the aptitude is excellent, it takes at least 1 year of hard work to condense a bloody vortex. Many apprentices with medium talents often need more than 3 years to condense a bloody vortex. Apprentices with lower aptitude, such as Charlotte Mecklen, failed to complete their cultivation in 4 years of college and had to rely on the power of the evil god to open the extraordinary. Thinking of the experience of his predecessor and the pit he left for himself, Charlotte sighed. The bloody glory flowed from the center of the eyebrows into the heart, and then flowed back from the heart to the center of the eyebrows, forming a subtle cycle between the two bloody vortices. Charlotte had only wanted to practice bloody glory for a while. He had never thought that he would provoke evil gods. 2 of them. Now he had finally returned to practicing bloody glory for a while, and had even been promoted to the next level. He could not help but sigh at the wonders of the world. A few hours later, Charlotte opened his eyes and felt that the bloody vortex in his chest had stabilized. The eyes formed by the runes between his eyebrows seemed to be clearer. And the scope of his insight had also expanded slightly. He had just woken up when a consciousness emerged from the diary, countdown to the coming of the Blood Clan evil god Karnstein. 26 days, 5 hours, and 13 minutes and 7 seconds. Charlotte was surprised and happy, thinking to herself, condensing the second bloody vortex can delay Karnstein's coming by 18 days. If I continue to practice, will I be able to make him never appear? He also knew that this was unlikely. Because he had not died by looking directly at the two evil gods, his spirituality had been improved, and his practice would surely advance by leaps and bounds in a short period of time, but after reaching a certain bottleneck, it would not be possible to be so rapid. However, this is always good news. It was almost dawn, and Charlotte suppressed her overflowing emotions, prepared to go out, and first go to Kilmainham prison. He had just been transferred to the new position and had already asked for leave once. It would be difficult to ask a servant to go there for a second leave in a short period of time, so it would be better to ask for leave in person. Charlotte believed that senior sister Menelman was a person who was easy to communicate with. However, what was unexpected was that when he arrived at Kilmainham prison in the morning, he found that Menelman did not come to work today. Charlotte waited for 2 hours and decisively skipped work early. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.